Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and as the theme says there, today it is Daytona Day in the NXTGEN Racing PROTO GT3 Championship as we embark on round number 4 tonight, the first of our 3 Super Endurance rounds in the series. This 12-round calendar consists of 3 Super Endurance rounds, and tonight is the first of those at the venerable American circuit. That means, of course, our schedule for tonight is a little bit more redacted compared to our previous schedules in the fact that we only have one race on the schedule tonight and one race event only. And you can see there the times in British Summer Time, and that is BST or UTC +1 is the case in just under 40 minutes time. At 8 o'clock this evening, we'll be getting underway for our one only feature race, 120 minutes, 2 hours, however you want to put it. And it will be the test of stamina and endurance for all of our drivers as they will look to try and achieve the best possible result over the course of the time available. And of course, this is going to be a big strategic race as well as one built on outright pace. Now, of course, our focus for tonight is on the Apex Racing Academy lobby. That's Lobby 1. And, well, what better way than to introduce Apex Racing Academy very shortly. But before we do, we must go through our standard procedure of informing you that you can tune in via one of 3 media platforms tonight for your viewing pleasure. Firstly, if you are a YouTube user, you can tune in via the official NXTGEN Racing YouTube channel. Or alternatively, if you are on Facebook, you can go to facebook.com/groups/NXTGEN Racing. And last but not least, if you are so Twitch inclined, you can tune in via twitch.tv/TX141. Who is TX141, I hear you ask? Well, that's me, your host and commentator for this evening and for the series. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And I'll be bringing you all of your racing action across the 2 lobbies, and it is the case that tonight we focus on Lobby 1, the Apex Racing Academy lobby. And without further ado, let's introduce our title sponsor for the lobby. So who are Apex Racing Academy, I hear you ask? Well, Apex Racing Academy is not just a setup shop. They're dedicated to making you better at iRacing with services, access to drivers and features not found on other driving schools and academies. Working with them will see you connecting with pros like never before. You can learn how to prepare for a race, build setups, improve lap times and understand how to use telemetry tools such as VRS. Every week they host multiple sessions where members can join the coaches and take advantage of group coaching sessions. And in partnership with SDK Gaming, all the data provided will be automatically synchronized directly to your PC. There's no need to go hunting for setup, replay or ghost files. The data is right there when you turn the simulator on. Interested? Why not sign up now at apexracingac.com. That website again, apexracingac.com. And of course, we're eternally grateful for Apex Racing Academy, or ARA in short, for continuing to sponsor the series as we make our way through the PROTO GT3 Championship. It is the case that we've been working with them at NXTGEN Racing for the best part of all of our series on the premier sim racing platform on PC, known as iRacing, dating all the way back, of course, to the GT3 Championship Season 1. And for this series, for the PROTO GT3 Championship, it is the case that the Apex Racing Academy are sponsoring the series and contributing to the prize pool for our GT3 drivers in particular, by providing yearly subscriptions for our winners in the GT3 Pro and GT3 AM classes. Meanwhile, it is the case, of course, that for our LMP PRO drivers who race in this lobby, they'll be open to a cash prize pool, the value of which is still to be determined. But, of course, thank you very much to Apex Racing Academy for being with us and being the title sponsor for our lobby. Now, before we come on to what is our Drivers' Championship and our Team Championship, we must quickly take you through the calendar. Well, it is the case that we are now entering the closing stages of the opening third. We started off in Watkins Glen on the 6th of April, we then went to Road Atlanta on the 13th of April. We then went from the US to Canada for Mosport on the 20th of April, so that was last time out. And today we mark our first 2-hour endurance round on the 27th of April, that is today, at the Daytona race course. We'll then be taking a week's break, of course, before heading to continental Europe with the Red Bull Ring on the 11th of May, to be followed by Hockenheim in Germany on the 18th of May, going from Austria to Germany, and then we'll be heading to Italy for Monza on the 25th of May, before going to Belgium for round number 8. That'll be the Spa on the 1st of June, and that will be the second of our 3 2-hour Super Endurance rounds. And then we'll be taking another week's break before return on the 15th of June for a visit to the British Isles. We'll be heading to Silverstone, the home of British motor racing, after which we'll then be heading to Japan. It's quite the foray. We'll be heading all the way across to Japan for the Suzuka circuit on the 22nd of June before returning to continental Europe for our final 2 rounds, the Nürburgring on the 29th of June, and then last but not least heading to the venerable Le Mans circuit, the Circuit de la Sarthe 24-hour circuit on the 6th of July, where we bring down the curtain with the 3rd and final of our 2-hour Super Endurance rounds. We've still got plenty of calendars to go, but it is the case today. We are in round number 4 at the Daytona road course on the 27th of April today, the 2-hour race there, and all of our drives are set to go. And going into this round, the championship standings could not be ever tighter in some classes and more distant in some of the others, and there are big questions to be answered tonight. So of course we start off by going through with our LMP PRO class here, and it is the case that after the opening 3 rounds we have seen that Chris Daines, leading now on 168 points, has had 3 rounds of perfection. It is the case he has picked up the maximum possible points tally in each of the 3 rounds, 56 points in each of the rounds, and he's now standing at the maximum possible points of 168, and well, can anybody stop him? That is the big question, because right now it is the case that whilst we did see Gaz Williams, who's currently 2nd, take the fight to Daines in the season opener at Watkins Glen at the start of April, we haven't quite seen that form from Gaz Williams, or indeed any driver, to take that major fight to Chris Daines. Although you could argue Ed Lack, last time out at Mosport at Canada, was able to take the fight to Daines at the start of the proceedings, and there was that qualifying shootout, of course, where Daines put it all on the line with the final lap and managed to sneak away with that pole position. So there have been signs that his competitors are closing up, but will they be able to deny Chris Daines a perfect score tonight, or will it be the case he adds that tally ever more? And with Gaz Williams at 20 points ahead of Robert Dasunik in P3 right now, it does look as though Gaz Williams is cementing himself as the main contender to Daines, but that could all change, of course. Dan Skinner only a further 3 points off of Robert Dasunik there in P4, Jamie Dory in P5 on 74 points, and only 3 ahead of fast-charging Alex Everett there, who wasn't able to take part last time out at what was Mosport. We're expecting him to return tonight. Adam Delmont there, the Excite Racing driver in P7, picking up some great points at the Canadian circuit. Consistent performances, now up to 67 points, 1 point ahead of Ed Lack, who had varied fortunes at Mosport, but great pace demonstrated by him in qualifying and also in that feature race. Alistair Kirk not able to pick up any points at last time out at Mosport, and then Phil McDougall completes our LMP2 Pro class there on 43 points with that good result in the sprint, but that retirement in the feature costing him dearly. Meanwhile, the complexion in the GT3 Pro class is a little bit different, with the fact that Matt Caruana right now leads on 129 points with a near-perfect evening at Mosport, albeit denied by the fact he wasn't able to pick up the win in the feature race through some brilliant teamwork by the Verano Motorsport team combo of what was Chris Daines and also their GT3 Pro driver of Gavin Gardner. The 2 drivers taking the fight to Matt Caruana and making it work significantly there. But Caruana still starting to place himself as the favourite in the GT3 Pro class, and if he can pick up a good points haul tonight, you can imagine he will want to extend that lead and as a result hold on to that advantage. Currently over Carmelo Martello of 25 points, and Martello having a difficult day at Mosport but picking up some good points on the board. Meanwhile, P3 man Billy Fletcher there with a great performance in the sprint to recover to pick up 21 points in the sprint after a difficult start, but in the feature it didn't quite go the way that Fletcher wanted it to, with an early retirement from the race, and so he lost out some key momentum there to Caruana. He's only 4 points ahead of Matthew Hodges in P4 there, and Gavin Gardner, of course, with that win that will be forever remembered now in terms of the teamwork between himself and his teammate Chris Daines, picking up the win in the feature race, now 92 points and breaking into the top 5. He, of course, is 15 points ahead of Tom Edmonds, who had a difficult day at Mosport, looking to be one of the favourites to win in the feature before that retirement cost him any points, and 14 points in the sprint. And William Foyle there in P7, the McLaren driver, having a difficult day as well, and will need to get some points on the board today because he's only 1 point ahead of 8th place man Lee Horn. Callum Regarton P9 there, and round off the top 10, Stefan Albanese for the DRS eSport team. We then have in P11 Jean-Louis Deschamps, who was not able to take part last time out, therefore not picking up any points, and on 44 points. Maurizio Marconi with a good performance in the sprint, but a difficult day in the feature in P12. 5 points behind him, Eduardo Francashim, and then Maurizio Massi completing our GT3 Pro standings there on 19 points. Meanwhile, in the GT3 AM class, well, it could not be tighter at the top. It's currently Matthew Addy who leads after 3 rounds. We have not had a consistent leader in the class after each round so far, and it's the case that Matthew Addy now stands at the top of the pile on 100 points. And I say at the top of the pile because you can see how close the top 10 are matched. They are separated from P1 to P10, so running from Matthew Addy to Scott McLean by 47 points. That is less than the margin of the maximum points that have been picked up in tonight's race. And that goes to show you how close this class has been throughout the opening 3 rounds. But Matthew Addy is our championship leader after 2 very good performances at Mosport, and he's 3 points ahead of Ben Payne, who really has been an undersung hero of the GT3 AM class. He hasn't been right up there at the tip of the spear, but he's been getting good performances all around, and we're expecting ever more from Ben Payne tonight. He's only 1 point ahead, however, of Matt Emmons, and here's the case that last time out of Mosport, the Sam Case's UK with Next Gen Racing driver having a difficult day, but he got some points on the board, and tonight he'll be looking to revive his form, no doubt. Alexander Batak and Stefan Gamborg Rasmussen there complete our top 5, the 2 Hilliard eSport drivers there from Denmark, both having difficult days at Mosport, albeit Stefan Gamborg Rasmussen losing out to a degree in the sprint race in particular, but right now both of them there looking to make that change to get back into the top 3. 1 point behind them in P6, Nigel Stock there with that first win of the series in the sprint race at Mosport, but no points in the feature due to retirement. You can see it in P7 there on 73 points and looking to come back tonight potentially with Stuart Taylor in P8, Morten Oosterhuis in P9, and Scott McLean in P10 there with 2 consistent finishes at Mosport. Then we have in P11 Mikkel Andreasen, who was a little bit of a guest driver, if you will. He's only taking part-time in this series this season. So as a result, whilst he did pick up that feature race win to add to his 3rd place in the sprint last time out, an absolutely brilliant pair of performances, we're not expecting to see him too frequently, unfortunately, on 44 points there. Joseph McManus, meanwhile, in P12 ahead of Darren Doherty and Callum Jenkins, completing your championship standings for the GT3 AM class. Meanwhile, in the Mark Sykes Designs team standings, this being the Constructors' Championship, if you will, it is the case that Verano Motorsport, they're leading on 260 points, the best part now of 25 points ahead of RP Motorsport Pro-Am. And RP Motorsport Pro-Am, after having that good run of form in the opening 2 rounds, reeled into a significant extent in round number 3, and now they're only 4 points ahead of challenged by DB1, who had a phenomenal pair of performances at Mosport, and indeed, they have now risen up the order. Next Gen Racing with Sam Case's UK in P4, ahead of the main Next Gen Racing team in P5. Hilliard eSport in P6 there, joint on 219 points, but ahead on countback versus challenged by DB2. And then Racing Team Astra, or RTA Blue, in P8, ahead of their sister team, Racing Team Astra Team Orange there in P9, and then Team Racing Evans complete that top 10. Team Tetrage in P11, ahead of 6R Project Black, Crest Autosport of Apex Tracks, Excite Rating, and Altitude Esports complete our top 15, and then round down to P20 of Crest Autosport Ferrari, DRS Esports LMS1, RD Simsport, TGC Racing, and RP Motorsport Senior. Outside the top 20 to complete our team standings is MRC Team ahead of Hollerton Racing, DRS Esport LMS2 not picking up major points last time out of Mosport, dropping down to P23, and it's BRM and TGC Bottom Split Heroes who make up our final 2 places in the order. Now we come from our standings to the track, and we've already mentioned we today are at the Daytona International Speedway Road Course, located in Daytona Beach of the state of Florida in the United States of America, and it is the case in visiting the Sunshine State. We're expecting clear conditions today over the course of the racing. This circuit made up of 12 corners with turns 1 through to 6 marking the infield section, and then turn 7 all the way round to 12 marking the run over the oval banking, as split up by the bus stop chicane through turns 8 through to 11. This circuit map provided to us by simracingwiki.com, to whom we're always grateful for the intel and information they provide us with. And it is the case, of course, if you want to name corners, well, the bus stop is known as turns 8 through to 11, the bus stop chicane in full, and turn 3 is known as the infield horseshoe, or the road course horseshoe, but we're going to be referring to the corners by their number typically for convenience. We'll bring you some onboard laps over the course of the racing tonight, but before we get into the race, we have to take you through the rules and regulations that are slightly different today compared to our typical race evening format. So as we can see, it is the case that for setup tonight, our LMP 2 class drivers shall be running the iRacing Daytona Road setup. Meanwhile, our GT3 drivers shall be running the iRacing Medium Downforce setup. This will present a challenge for both classes in terms they have to get used to a whole new setup for tonight. On top of that, in general, as this is a super endurance round, there's no qualifying session or sprint race, so we'll come on about our grid order shortly, and double points shall be up for grabs in the feature race, excluding fastest lap. So drivers can earn a maximum of 52 points tonight. It's 50 points for the win and 2 points for the fastest lap. And in the feature race, the grid will be set by reverse Drivers' Championship order based on the latest championship standings, so from the previous round. The grid will be separated into car classes, starting at approximately 10 seconds apart, so the LMP2 drivers will be starting ahead of the GT3s, and I should clarify, the GT3 Pros will be starting ahead of the GT3 AMs based on reverse Drivers' Championship order, but there will be no separation between the GT3 driver classes, so the Pros start ahead of the AMs, but they are all one block out on circuit. There'll be 2 mandatory pit stops tonight over the course of the 2 hours, not 1 but 2, and our drivers will need to take on fuel and change all 4 tyres at least once. So if they do it in a single pit stop or over the 2 pit stops, say do the front tyres in the first pit stop and the rears in the second, they can do that, or vice versa. Each driver shall have 2 fast repairs available, and the driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 25 or more instant points. Well, I think that's enough of rules, regulations and whatnot. We now look back to our live pictures here, and well, as we are waiting to go racing in very short order, you can see the majority of our drivers now parked up in what is the pit lane there, and we look to Matthew Addy here, championship leader in the GT3 AM class going into tonight. And of course the pressure will be on Addy. Can he finally establish himself or be the one to establish themselves as a leader in the GT3 AM class? It seems as though it's a poison chalice, that lead of the GT3 AM class. Whoever takes it seems to fall by the wayside in the next round, and will he be able to do it tonight? Of course, keeping in mind he'll be starting right from the back, and that is a nasty bit of pressure to have on his mind, but of course it could work out for him given the long run into turn 1 for the GT3 drivers. Again, they'll be starting 10 seconds back from the LMP drivers when they go green at the start finish line, which means that the GT3s will be starting well up into the banked oval of turn number 12. Meanwhile, we look further down the pit lane there, we can see Chris Daines from Verano Motorsport, the man of the hour, who continues to shine in the LMP2 Pro class. Will he be able to make it a perfect 4 out of 4, or will he finally drop some points? That'll be the question that everybody asks, and it'll be Gareth Williams in particular, who you can see parked in front of him, who would love to pick up some of those important points and start to reel Daines in. Well, the final practice session is complete. Any moment now we will be transitioning over to the formation of the grid, and we'll take you through that grid as we get ready to go racing. But my goodness, we have got some fantastic racing action ahead, and any moment now with all of our drivers in the pits. Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for us then to form that grid and take you through that grid order once more in terms of how our drivers are going to line up tonight. So, in the LMP2 Pro class, it will be Phil McDougall who lines up on pole ahead of Alistair Kirk there. It will be the CXR Project Black driver who's lined up by the TGC racing driver on that front row. Then behind them, it will be Edward Lack from CXR Project Black, joined by Adam Delmont on row number 2 from Excite Racing. Then Jamie Dory on row number 3, and it will be the NXTGEN racing driver who's joined by Excite Racing's Dan Skinner. And then on row number 4, it will be Robert de Sunnik from Team Racing Netherlands, joined by Gaz Williams in P8 there for NXTGEN Racing. And then the last of our LMP2 Pro drivers will be Chris Daines, our championship leader, who starts off on his lonesome on what will be effectively row number 5, the Verano Motorsport driver there. We'll then have the privateer of Antonio Giovinazzi starting at the head of what is the GT3 Pro class. It is the case he's a guest driver for tonight, and he'll be starting right at the front of the class, and I believe he is bringing it to the circuit today, an Audi ARA LMS. And as our drivers get underway very shortly, it will be the case that we have Maurizio Macconi there, who lines up P11, the DRS Esport LMS2 driver, and he'll be joined by Eduardo Francescin. And then behind the 2 DRS Esport drivers there, as they get ready to go racing, we will have, as we just take a little bit of a look further down that grid order, we have Stefan Albanese and Jean-Louis Deschamps, the DRS Esport LMS2 driver, being joined by Delta Motorsports' Jean-Louis Deschamps. And then we have Callum Reed-Garton, P15 for Altitude Esports, Lee Horn alongside him from NXTGEN Racing with Sam Cases UK, William Fogg from Crest Autosport of Apex, and Tom Edmonds there from Altitude Esports on row number 9, Gavin Garner from Verano Motorsport, joined by 6, our Project Black's Matthew Hodges on row 10, Carmelo Martello on row 11, DRS Esport, they're joined by GTWR RHG Academy's Matt Caruana in P22, Darren Doherty, the AM driver, the privateer there, who lines up on pole for the GT3 AMs with Scott McLean alongside him from Crest Autosport Ferrari. And then behind them, we do have what will be Stuart P. Taylor from TGC Racing, and Morten Essus from Hilliard Esport alongside him. Stephen Gamble, Grace Moose from Hilliard Esport as well, and Crest Autosport Tracks' Nigel Stott. Then Alexander Batak and Matt Emmons will be making up row at number 15, Ben Payne and Matthew Addy on row number 16, and then it will be Jordan Pope from TGC Bottom Split Heroes, who lines up last but not least on that final row. As we get ready to go racing then, ladies and gentlemen, it is only a partial formation start, and we'll be seeing the safety car pulling on in, and we'll go racing any moment now for 2 hours.
Green flag, green flag.
And there's the green flag, ladies and gentlemen. It's lights out and away we go here at Daytona as Phil McDougall gets our field underway here. And as they all make their way down into turn 1 for the first time of asking, will we see any early overtakes here? Looks like Alistair Kirk's not been able to find it, but Adam Delmont trying to go all the way around the outside here. Nice and early, and well, he's not able to get it done versus Ed Lack, but they all safely make it through as they come down into, where's the horseshoe here? And as they come on in, Adam Delmont sneezes the brakes. He sees them very heavily and they snatch, and he's in to the tyre barrier almost, but just misses it. But meanwhile, it looks so all of our GT3 class drivers making their way safely through, which is obviously holding lead right now. And as they all come pouring out to turn number 3, everybody okay for the time being. I'm not hearing of any major incidents. It does look as though everybody's been able to keep it calm as they all come on through here and now head up towards turn number 5. But as they come right on through, we can see Stefan Gamble-Rasmussen under a little bit of pressure from Scott McLean here, who's trying to find a way on through. But I think Gamble-Rasmussen has actually gained the place as they run through. And in the rearview picture, that's Matt Emmons trying to go around the outside of Nigel Stock in the battle for what is P6 in the GT3 AM class, but he can't quite find it right now. Instead, he has to tuck back in. But it's been quite a subtle start here at Daytona as they make their way back out onto the oval. And as they do, we look back up towards our leaders right now, and will Alistair Kirk here battling side by side with Phil McDougall. McDougall on the inside to outside, Alistair Kirk on the inside to outside as they roll on out the corner now, the bus stop, coming out 10 and 11, and now up onto the bank in a 12, and well, it's still going to be side by side here for a long run, and you can see now how they're going to 2x2 formation. We see SC Ed Lack there. Oh, goodness me! And Ed Lack getting tapped there, just as he tried to push his way between what was, I believe, that was, unless I'm very much mistaken, coming through Alistair Kirk and company, and Lack has picked up damage. So as a result, now he's going to drop down the order, and meanwhile, Skinner's going to try and go around the outside of Jamie Dory, but that's not going to happen, with Dory holding a very nice tight inside line there as they roll them through, and as they come out of turn number 1 and through 2, it does look as though Dory holding on firm, but that could have been curtains, as we are hearing that Alistair Kirk is into the pit lane for that contact with Lack, and well, I do wonder what damage has been picked up as they make their way onto lap number 2 of this 2-hour race. And as they come on through, we can see a little bit further back here how we do have Maurizio Marconi. He's moved up into P2, the GT3 Pro class, and now I think some of the elbows are starting to come out a little bit here as we see going up the inside, Callum Regards dares the drink versus what is there, Stefan Albanese, and there's a little bit of contact, and Callum Regards has that lift off. We see Lee Horn, they're getting it all sorts of wrong as well on the exit of turn number 3. There are a couple of drivers being caught out by cold tyres, and as they make their way on through now and head down towards turn number 5 once again, I think it's the case that Lee Horn really struggling, and Stuart P. Taylor here, who is currently leading what is the GT3 AM class, he's found his way into the lead as we see going a bit wide. That's Stefan Gamble-Rasmussen deciding he doesn't want to make the corner, he's going a bit deep, and as they make their way on through and up into turn number 5, well, it does look as though some drivers being caught out early in this race, and it may be a little bit of cold tyres just having a bit of an impact early on, as it does take a while to switch the tyres on here at Daytona as they make their way on around and up onto the oval banking once again, coming through turn number 7. But we look back towards the battle for what is the lead here, and we ride on board the gearbox, and this is the battle for the lead of the GT3 AM class. And Stuart Taylor, well, I would have to say, is definitely seizing on this opportunity to try and break away early as they make their way into the bus stop chicane, and what you can see, he is trying to disappear off into the distance as we're hearing that Edward Lack is into the pits, and oh goodness me, that's the case of Ustu's there, just getting it a little bit wrong, coming through the bus stop and losing some critical momentum, and that has cost him quite dearly as they come on round. As they make their way through on the bank, and we do look back to Matt Emmons meanwhile, who is going to look for the move around the outside. He's going high here versus what is Scott McLean. It's Audi on the right versus the Ferrari on the downside, on the inside, and as they make their way down, you can see as the picture transfers over here, Evans has got the gradual overspeed building here. They'll both be close to the rev limiter, but as they make their way into the left-hander turn, oh goodness me, and that is Alexander Patak saying, okay, well Matt, if you're going to go round the outside, I'm going to come the inside, and well, that is daylight robbery for Scott McLean. He has been robbed to 2 positions in the space of 1 moment, and well, what a pass there to be seized on by Alexander Patak, as we can see Alistair Kirk now trying to find his way past the GT3s to go racing with his LMP class opponents as they make their way around on another lap. Let's take a look back at that pass by Alexander Patak. So riding on board here, you're going to see that Patak down behind McLean, and McLean broke very early there, and well, I think Patak recognised it was never going to beat Emmons to the apex, but that was a very brave move, and well, it has worked out very well for Patak, and Emmons now will have to keep his eye on the fact that he does have a rather fast driving Alexander Patak who's trying to come up behind him. But meanwhile, we look from the GT3 AM class to LMP 2 Pros, and we can see the battle for the lead continues as they make their way down and around once again, and as they come roaring on down into turn number 1 this time, as we see Lee Horn leaving the pit lane, it is Skinner on the inside of Dory. Dory's gone a little bit deep, and Skinner is now your race leader in the LMP 2 Pro class as they come through and down into turn number 3, and as they roll him through into the right hander, he locks up a little bit to Skinner. That's going to cost him dearly on exit. It will, of course, extend his exit profile there. He will have a much straighter run up towards turn number 4 as a result, but he will lose a little bit of speed, and Dory's not giving in here. Jamie Dory, of course, returning and fighting. He's well part of this LMP2 Pro class, and as they make their way through the right-hander, Skinner just holding on for now, holding that outside line, which the ARA on these LMP2 machines means they can take outside lines more comfortably compared to those GT3 class cars with less aero package, of course, and now Skinner holds on to the lead of the class for the time being, but I do wonder whether all this fighting is bringing P4 man Chris Daines right, because he's already gained multiple places and he's just kept his head out of trouble and is pushing on. But meanwhile, we look from them down towards what is the leaders once again, and here's the case. We can see Skinner here versus Dory. Dory inching ever closer, but he's not able to find a way on in. He has to wait for an opportunity. Meanwhile, I can tell you in the GT3 Pro class, as we just see there, that's William Fall going sideways across the road, and who's that with him? I believe that's one of the DRS eSport machines. I'm not 100% sure who that is. I think that's Albanese who's had a little bit of an off. What exactly happened there? Well, Foyle got turned, but can we find out a little bit more other than the fact he was sideways across the road? Was his mate is waiting to turn towards turn 4 there. William Fall down the inside, and well, I think that's Albanese losing the rear of the car. He went a bit wide coming through 4 and collected William Fall for his efforts. I believe that's Albanese. That's very unfortunate, and I think both of the GT3 drivers were upset a little bit by the fact they did have was Alistair Kirk come roaring on through, and that may have just caused what was the contact, and well, as a result, now as they make their way through, I'm not saying that Alistair Kirk is responsible for it, but I think that may have just triggered what was then Albanese going a little bit wider than he perhaps planned to. Perhaps he just misanticipated the LMP coming through and having to make it 3 wide there. But what is said is done, and Albanese is dropping down the order like a stone. And oh, goodness me, he's just gone through the tyre barrier, I think. Something's happened to Albanese. What on earth has happened to the Italian? Was his making his way into the bus stop chicane here. The DRS eSport LMS2 driver goes very deep on the brakes. He misses his braking point, and that's the straight line, and the car just bounces back onto the road there. And well, he did very well to avoid it careening into Gavin Gardner, and I think Gardner might have had his heart in his mouth for a brief moment. But Albanese, to be fair, trying to stay out of trouble as he now gets himself back up to speed here. He's lost a lot of ground. In fact, I think he's coming into the pit, so there may be some damage to the car or just a flat spot on the tyres, given the fact that he did have a little bit of a moment where he careened across the road. But we look from him to Gavin Gardner right now, who's going after Carmelo Martello here, and of course Gavin Gardner, the driver who picked up the win in the feature at Mosport last week. Well, right now he's quite way down the order. He's down in P8 in the GT3 Pro class, and he's looking to try and come through in short order. But meanwhile, once I say that, Stuart P. Taylor battling here with Morten Oosthuus for the lead of the GT3 AM class. He's holding off the BMW M4 driver for now, but it does look as though Oosthuus here, the Hillary eSport driver, has got a little bit more in the tank, although he goes a bit deep there into turn number 5, and that's cost him quite dearly as they make their way on around. As they come down to turn at number 6 here, it will be about applying power on exit and seeing who can get the upper hand. And right now it does seem as though Stuart Taylor has the upper hand when needing to get the power down, but it's in the infield section where the Porsche driver is struggling by comparison with Oosthuus. And to be fair, this is going to sound odd. We'd expect it to be the reverse, given the fact that the Porsche 911, the lead car, which is our focus of the camera shot right now, is typically the ultimate handling car in this class, the GT3 class, whereas the BMW is a bit more of an in-between of a power versus a handling car. But it does seem as though here the TGC racing driver is mastering the art of getting that power down and holding at bay the BMW. But I say that, and now as they come out of the bus stop this time, I think Oosthuus has got the run, because as they're going to be coming around here, it is the case. We can see Oosthuus is trying to go high. Now, will he be able to find a way to go high all the way around? He's going to need a lot of bravery here, because Stuart Taylor's not going to be one to back out on the brakes. And as they make their way across the timeline very shortly, it's going to be the run into turn 1. Oosthuus is going to go all the way round on the brakes. Taylor tries to keep his nose in, but with a very, very bold move, Morten Oosthuus is now your GT3 AM leader. And well, that was definitely brave of the BMW driver, but he got it done. Now the question will be, can his teammate Gamborg Rasmussen follow through, or will he be tucked in behind? We see Nigel Stock there going a little bit deep, understeering, under braking into turn number 3, and he has got Matt Evans very close behind him. But we can see just how close the battle is for the lead of the GT3 AM class. We have got 6 drivers separated by only 2.5 seconds, running from Alexander Batak in P6 all the way out to leader Morten Oosthuus. But it will be the case, it'll spread out very shortly if Gamborg Rasmussen keeps making mistakes like that, locking up into turn 5, because he is naturally going to create a buffer to Stuart Taylor in front of him as they make their way through the left hand. And we are already hearing that Maurizio Marconi has had he's listed as out of this race. I'm wondering if he's got an engine problem or a severe severe damage to the car early on, but we do have a retirement from Maurizio Marconi. It's listed, and we have lost one driver already at the 10-minute mark of this race. As we continue unless Marconi is going to be returning at some point later on. But as they make their way on through here, we do look up to what is the LMP2 Pro class, and we can see Gaz Williams in P4. Well, he's chasing after Chris Daines, and all of our LMP2 Pro drivers do have to keep in mind that the LMP2 machinery, the Dallara P217, does have quite a limited fuel tank in this race. So as a result, if they want to stick to only 2 stops, they're going to have to be smart about how they use the fuel and how they use slipstream to potentially fuel save behind a driver in front on what is the oval run, because otherwise they could find themselves suffering from a loss of fuel. As we see here, Phil McDougall going around the outside to inside of Adam Delmont, and Delmont there, well, he's looking for the move, was Delmont, the Excite Racing driver. He couldn't quite find it and instead had to back off. Phil McDougall not giving in. But as they make their way on through on turn number 2 right now, we do look a little bit further back here to what is our leader in the GT3 Pro class of Antonio Giovinazzi, as the privateer makes his way through the left-hander at turn at number 4, and right now holding on to what is a sizable margin lead of 1.5 seconds. And I say sizable margin because 1.5 seconds is about the gap you need to break that toe running on the oval banking and on the long straights here, what affected the long flat-out sections. And we can see Callum Regarton as a result. He is effectively the leader of the GT3 Pro class if you only include the drivers who are the main competitors in the championship and no guest drivers here. And we can see that Callum Regarton right now comes to be running at the head of the pack in the Altitude Esports Porsche 911 here. And I do believe, unless I'm mistaken, that is a car change there for Callum Regarton. I think he may be picking up a points penalty as a result of that, if I remember the rules correctly, because drivers, they switch cars, they're allowed to do so up to the end of round number 6, but they do have a points penalty of 50 points associated with that. But I may be wrong, but Callum Regarton here, I think, has switched his car to the Porsche from the Lamborghini and seems to be enjoying it right now. But he has behind him the Audi R8 driver from the GTWR Roman Grosjean Academy, or the R8G Academy of Matt Caruana here. And well, the Britain, we know the leader of the GT3 Pro Championship, is pushing on hard as they make their way down what is the run all the way up to that start-finish line. And Caruana closing, and in fact he's doing a little bit of bump drafting here to the back of what is Callum Regarton, giving a little bit of a nudge along and heads down into the left-hander of turn number 1. And as they roll on through here, you see Jean-Louis Deschamps, the Delta Motorsport driver. Well, if anybody knows how to drive that Porsche 911, it is Jean-Louis Deschamps. He is the man who knows how to make this machine work, from Belgium, of course. And we sung his praises in season 2 of the GT3 Championship. He definitely does know his craft in this machinery. As we are hearing into the pit lane comes Stefan. Oh, goodness me. Now, what on earth has happened here? Gamble Rasmussen into the pit. Whoa. Now, this was only moments ago. I think he's made a mistake under braking. That's Stuart Taylor coming, and Gamble Rasmussen has just lost the car and drifted into the pit exit wall there, because there is a gap in the wall. And, well, the Hillary Esport driver, who was doing very well, but we saw he was having some difficulty under braking in that Mercedes. That difficulty has materialised in contact with the wall, and, well, I believe he's had to jump to the pits as a result of it. And we're also hearing that Alexander Patak's had a major moment. Now, this was only moments ago. This is Patak versus Emmons into turn 1. Emmons on the inside, Patak on the outside. And I think Patak's just simply slid the car loose. And, well, he's then tried to spin the wheels up. He's got himself back up to speed and parked it. And, well, oh, goodness me. And that's the CXR Project Black LMP2 machine that's come through and made contact with him. And I'm not sure who that was, whether that was Phil McDougall or Ed Lapp. But regardless, it has not gone right for Hillary Esport. They've had 2 drivers in a very short space of time, both make mistakes, and those mistakes have led to them going to the pit lane. As meanwhile, Chris Daines is now your leader of the LMP2 Pro class here, as he passes and laps his teammate Gavin Gardner there from Caruana Motorsport. And well, Daines does have Dan Skinner behind him. Now, is it any surprise that Daines has come through the field quite rapidly? Not too much of a surprise given the form he's seen, but of course now the question will be, can he manage this race to perfection all the way through? Because Daytona is a merciless circuit in terms of the fact that you only need to put one foot wrong. We've already seen multiple drivers have nightmare moments to their races, as right now it does look as though Dan Skinner not able to come back at Daines. Again, it's early days yet, and the challenge will be for Daines. If he does try and make an early breakaway here, with only 15 minutes of this race complete by the time the drivers get through turn number 5, the problem for Daines will then be, can he fuel save enough or manage to fuel well enough to essentially go only 2 stops into this race? There were, I heard down in the paddock in the build-up to tonight in the final practice sessions in LMP2 drives, there were a couple who had their reservations about whether they could make the fuel tank last for what is those 2 stops, whether they need a 3rd stop to take on that extra fuel. We will have to wait and find out, and that will be the big challenge that faces all of them. As we do say hello very briefly, I apologise for neglecting the chat there, ladies and gentlemen. It's been so quick in terms of us getting underway with racing, but hello there to Katie Eames in the Facebook chat, who is loving the long races, more drama, and looking forward to seeing anyone can beat Chris Daines, the man of the hour in the LMP Pro class, and continue to be as they make the way down in towards the bus stop chicane here. And of course also asking the question, can Callum Regarton take on Antonio Giovinazzi? That is one question we'd love to see the answer to, and right now the expectation is there will be a battle between the two of them as we ride on board here with Callum Regarton, who is closing up behind our GT3 Pro leader. Now, of course, for Callum Regarton at this point, he's got to be worried about the fact, and you can see that in the TV cam, beautiful TV camera in the middle of the car. That is Matt Caruana very close behind as well, as all three of them line astern as they come across the timeline to go on to another lap for them. It's now lap number 10, and you can see Callum Regarton there lifting off into the braking zone for turn number 1. Smart move, it saves him a little bit of fuel, and also what it means is he can essentially avoid that potential concertina effect that you get under braking into turn 1 here, or into any heavy braking corner at circuits such as Daytona. But as we look to the exterior cameras, we can see that the LMP2 class now coming on through, and the one driver who's been caught out by this very badly is Jamie Dory, who's been boxed in behind Callum Regarton. He can now come on through. You can see that Gaz Williams coming through right with him. The two next-gen racing drivers coming through together. And the challenge, of course, for them here is, as they make their way on through the right-hander at turn number 5, well, it's the case that Jamie Dory's lost a little bit of time, but meanwhile, Callum Regarton has also suffered to a degree, and Antonio Giovinazzi has actually been given a lot of breathing room as a result of this, and now Regarton has got Matt Caruana, who's got him right where he wants him, because what Caruana can now think about is, does he jump into that P2 position and go hunting after Giovinazzi himself? That is the challenge, however, with these GT3 cars, much like the MP2 cars. Every little bit of fuel saving you can do by just running in the toe of the driver in front helps you out later on. So do you really want to be the lead driver at that given point in the race? That is the question they've got to ask themselves as they make their way down into the bus stop chicane here, and as they roll on through, we'll soon find out when we do get to around the 40-minute mark. Now, in terms of when we expect the pit stops to occur, we are expecting the pit stops typically to be split rather evenly across this race. So normally the first stops will occur somewhere around the 30 to 50-minute marks, and then when we get to around the 70 to 90-minute marks, that's when we expect our second stops. But we have seen some craziness in the past in these two endurance races, and this is not craziness when you see Gaz Williams passing Jamie Dory there on the low line. These two drivers are swapping places, working together for next gen racing, and understandable there, deciding to swap places, and I think feeling that Gaz Williams can now take the lead for a brief while. But it is one of those cases whereby we have seen some drivers actually pit and take both stops pretty much back to back to take them to the end if fuel has not been as much of a concern. But right now, speaking of what is a concern, it's a concern for Matt Emmons whether he can find his way past Stuart P. Taylor here as they make their way down into turn 1 once again. Now, I did have the pleasure of briefly catching up with Matt Emmons in the build-up to tonight. He was the only driver I could actually grab, given the fact that everyone was so frantically practicing for this round, that he looks to continue this battle with Taylor down to turn 3. But what Emmons was saying to me in the build-up is that he's really been looking forward to tonight, although he is racing, I should point out, with a chest infection and also a broken finger. So he expects it to be fun, but a major challenge. And I'm not sure if he wanted that repeated live on air, but it is the case right now. He's soldiering against the elements, and well, good luck to the man, I say, because right now he's putting in a great performance. And he was also saying that he's found a lot of pace at Daytona, and he is sporting a new livery. He's gone from the yellow-orange next-gen racing with Sam Case's UK livery to what we like to refer to as the Matt Emmons Black Mamba Special livery, in the fact that he's running in those stealthy orange-black colours. And well, if we do get a transition to night time, that car may only be visible for its headlights, we reckon, as he makes his way around right now. But brand new livery on the car, looking very nice indeed for Emmons. But right now, it's not looking as nice at the fact that he's chasing after Stuart Taylor, and Morten Oosterhuis is only half a second up the road, and he will want to try and take the win off of the pair of them and come at the end of this one. But as we look from him all the way down to what is P5 in the class, we can tell you that right now Nigel Stock falling a little bit off of Matthew Addy here, and in front of the two of them are the Hilliard Esport drivers of what is Alexander Batak and Stefan Gamborg Rasmussen. Remember, they are both a lap down at this point due to their respective incidents earlier on in the race. But right now, Nigel Stock, after what was a strong start, as we can see there, that's Ed Lack trying to find his way between the GT3 drivers in. I think a little bit of hesitation as he makes his way through, but he finds his way through in the end. And you can see Nigel Stock here coming up behind Matthew Addy, and the Hilliard Esport drivers both pulling over to the right, both respecting the blue flags. Fair play to them as they all make their way on through. As they come down to turn number 1 this time around, well, Nigel Stock here not able to find a way on through for the time being. He is looking for it, however, and well, he's waiting with bated breath. But meanwhile, we do see, as I believe we just lost Stuart Taylor there for a brief moment, a little bit of connectivity issues with Stuart Taylor. They shouldn't hurt too much, we hope. But what I can tell you right now is that Morten Oosthuus is under a lot of pressure from Taylor and also Emmons. We ride on board the gearbox with our GT3 AM leader, and as he makes his way down towards turn number 5, we can see coming through, that's Ed Lack, the LMP2 driver. Now, how's he going to get involved in this? Well, it looks as though he finds his way past Stuart Taylor on the inside into 5. Oosthuus, he'll go up the inside of into turn number 6. That should not cost the Dane as much as it's cost Taylor, but it is the case that you can see as they come out to turn number 6 and up onto the bank of 7 they go. Oosthuus is not able to get away. He just cannot find a way to break the toe, and as a result, whilst he's able to open up a bit of a gap initially, you can see how now as they build up speed and they get up towards top of gear, this is where the slipstream really kicks in and starts to hurt Oosthuus because of the fact he does not have any way to turn forward. Oh, goodness me, in there we saw Alistair Kirk coming through, and I think Stuart Taylor was wondering if Kirk was going to come outside or inside, and in the end, well, it's the case that Kirk came through on the inside. That could have been curtains there for what was Taylor if he got that wrong. Kirk had misinterpreted it as well. Well, thankfully that did not happen for the pair of them, and instead they stay as they were as they roll around here to come to the end of another lap. But as they make the way through, we do look up to what is the battle for the lead of the GT3 Pro class, and we can see it is still Giovinazzi leading by only a couple of tenths of a second here versus what is Callum Regarton behind, and then Matt Caruana tucked in behind him as they roll out to turn number 3, and we are seeing that stagnation in that change of order. But one thing I can tell, whilst this has been not changing, is that Tom Edmonds has now put himself up into P4 in the GT3 Pro class, and he's now ahead of Jean-Louis Deschamps, and both of them in the Porsche 911. It's the case the Porsche proving very popular this season, it must be said. And how did the pass happen, I hear you ask? Well, let's take a look at a replay and show you how it was done. This was only moments ago, and this was making their way down towards the start-finish line, and in the end, Jean-Louis Deschamps pulling over to the right here. I think respecting the fact that Edmonds was always going to have the overspeed to go for the move, and the Altitude Esports driver simply tucks it up the inside, and with that, he then peels in front. Does Deschamps look for a comeback? No, he lifts off there into the braking zone and says, "You've got it, take us up to the battle for the lead." And that's fair enough. Deschamps there playing the tactical role, and I think Tom Edmonds will also appreciate that, given the fact they're so early into this race, only 20 minutes into this race, out of the 2 hours. We've got plenty of distance to go here at Daytona as they continue to make their way on around. Now, with that in mind, of course, with that pass being made, where is P6 in the GT3 Pro class? Well, it's Eduardo Franceschin from DRS Esport LMS1, and right now he's running in a bit of a lonesome P6. You have to forgive me for saying this. In fact, he's in a no man's land. 5.8 seconds up the road is Jean-Louis Deschamps, and Gavin Gardner is 8.8 seconds behind him. No real case of any action for Franceschin at the moment, but I think he won't mind that. I think he'll take it as it comes. In fact, he can just enjoy a relatively quiet race right now and just focus on pushing forward. And speaking of a driver who's been pushing forward, it is the case that Gavin Gardner only recently found a way past Carmelo Martello, who of course is always Francescin's teammate for DRS Esport, but right now Gardner's under a bit of pressure here from the Italian into Britain as they make the way into turn 1, but there's no attempt at a move there. They stay as they were, but we can show you the pass that was made by Gavin Gardner on Martello only moments ago. And in a similar fashion here, I think we're going to see what is a overtake much like Edmonds on Deschamps, but Gardner's actually going to have to work for this, or no, it is the case there. Martello lifted off into the braking zone by the looks of things, and Gardner with the overspeed said, okay, I'll brake around the outside and take the natural racing line, and got the move done. As they make their way on through into the infield section here, we can see that Gardner running a good pace, much like Martello behind him, but however, both of them running approximately 1 second off of the leaders in the GT3 Pro class. And of course, Gardner is the one hurt most by this for the simple reason he doesn't have the slipstream to work to his advantage. Meanwhile, I can tell you that looking back to the LMP2 Pro class, we do have Robert Sunik here, who is putting pressure on what is in front of him, unless I'm very much mistaken. That is Adam Delmont as they roll him through and up into turn number 3. But Robert Sunik here tucked in behind Delmont and not really able to find a way past at this time, instead of having to wait for that opportunity as they make their way on out of the corners. As they come roaring on through, it is the case they continue to look as they were. And well, Robert Sunik here, I think having played the patient hunter, he's not able to really get close enough at this time. But I can tell you what has changed, and he's been a patient hunter, but now he is leading in that battle to be in P2. That is Matt Emmons, who has found his way past Stuart Taylor. He's got into that P2 in the GT3 M class, and now will Stuart Taylor come back at him as we ride on board with the Porsche 911 driver. He's very close here as he makes his way into 6th gear. Now this is the horrible part, of course, he's got to balance it versus the limiter. He's got the overspeed. Will he hit the limiter before he can make the pass? I don't think so. And as they make their way around and on to another lap, it's going to be Stuart P. Taylor on the outside here versus Emmons on the inside. Emmons is going to defend this. Stuart Taylor's going to go the long way round if he wants to get it done. He can't quite get it done, Taylor. It looks as though Emmons has sealed the deal here. For every moment they fight, every corner they battle through, will release more to Noosdoos as the foreground of your camera. He's just cut through the camera shot there, and Noosdoos right now is being given the gift of 1.8 seconds of a gap to Matt Emmons and Stuart Taylor. I can also report that Callum Garton and Matt Caruana have started battling again for P2 in the GT3 Pro class, although it is the case that the Altitude Esports driver has stayed ahead for the time being as they make their way on the bank into turn number 7. And as they roll on through here, we look to our left-hand side to say hello to Chips Are Good in the Twitch chat there. And indeed, Chips Are Good, and well, it's the case. Matt Caruana's not going to gamble his poker chips, not the chips that are good to eat, is the case. He'll be looking at his poker chips with regards to gambling for P2. He decides instead to play it safe, tuck him behind Callum Garton and give him the bump draft down into the bus stop chicane. But look behind them now, we have Tom Edmonds who's closed up, and Jean-Louis Deschamps who's only 7.5 tenths back. And really right now, Jean-Louis Deschamps actually has one of the most advantageous positions, so long as he doesn't drop too much further back. He's got a nice distant toe off of the GT3 drivers in front of him, and he can make this work very comfortably. But meanwhile, we look back up to Caruana here, who's going to look around the outside of what is Callum Garton into turn 1. Will he be able to do it this time? I don't think so. You can see Phil McDougall there, P9 in the LMP Pro class, trying to cut his way on through as they make the way through turn 1 into turn. McDougall's going to have to be very patient here because the GT3 drivers are all battling for this lead, and McDougall looks at the inside of both Caruana and Callum Garton, and Caruana seizes the opportunity here to dive to the inside himself. Callum Garton went a little bit deep, to be fair, I think, to respect McDougall trying to come through, and as they make the way up into turn 4, it's side by side here with Matt Caruana, who will be on the outside to inside line for turn number 5, and Callum Garton there stays on the outside into the corner, and I think Caruana's finally found a way to get an advantage now. Will he hold on to it come the bus stop, because of the fact they've got the run to 6 and then they've got the long run through the left-hander of what is turn number 6 all the way, sorry, the long run of the left-hander of turn 7 all the way down to the bus stop, so I should say, get my numbers correct. And as they make the way through on the banking now of 7, we can see Callum Garton has not had the best of exits out of turn 6 of the run onto 7, and this may hurt him a little bit. This may trigger a bit of a pinch in terms of the speed he can deploy as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane. Now, can he find a way to get on through? Well, he's going to be close, but I think he's going to back off there, because if he was going for it, he would have peeled out by now and looked for it under the braking. And as they make the way through, Tom Edmonds now starting to get a bit closer as Reed Garton hit a bit of an early cliff in performance. That could be a consideration as they make the way down towards what is the start-finish line here. And what it does mean is that Caruana is being given a little bit of breathing room, but Edmonds has actually backed off here. And I think they're all playing that game of slipstream. I think they really are thinking about that fuel preservation and bump drafts in the long right now. You can see Callum Garton, again, tapping the rear of Caruana, give him a little bit of a nudge up towards Giovinazzi. And Giovinazzi right now, of course, in that horrible position of what is, he's the lead driver in class, so he doesn't have any slipstream gifted to him, which means he has to use more fuel if he wants to maintain that pace versus his peers behind him, whereas Caruana can essentially dictate the pace and attach himself to the slipstream of Giovinazzi and say, you know what, I'm just going to simply back the car up to 95% and save myself perhaps a lap's worth of fuel over the course of this opening stint. Now, we are seeing there in the Facebook chat, as provides us, I believe that is probably Lee Horn in the what is the NXTGEN racing profile there, saying that some drivers are already up to 12 instant points. When remember, drive-through penalties will be given to drivers who pick up more than 25 or more instant points. So we could have some drive-through penalties up for grabs here today. Of course, we don't like to see them, but that could be a factor in this race, given the fact we're not even quite at the halfway point. And in fact, that isn't Martin Brinkworth. My apologies, Martin. Lee Horn is racing in this race, getting my name's mixed up here, and not to be forgotten about Martin Brinkworth, of course, an absolutely fundamental member at NXTGEN Racing, doing all of the background post-race or the post-race organisation and the pre-race and mid-race organisation, including the deployment of the safety car today. And well, thank you, Martin, for keeping us informed with regards to that situation. as the instant points do pick up here, and we can see that Robert Dasunik meanwhile has fallen a little bit off of the bat of Adam Delmont in the battle for P5 in the LMP2 Pro class. But where Dasunik has fallen backwards in P6, it is the case that we can see that Adam Delmont on that charge right now as he makes his way through at turn number 7 here and looking to go after Jamie Dory. Well, Jamie Dory here will have to keep his one eye on his rear view mirror and one eye looking forward, because in return it is the case the next gen racing driver in P4 is looking to go after Gaz Williams, his teammate, as they make their way down and around through the bus stop chicane once again. Now, as they make the way on through, and it is the case, we are now half an hour, I should say, into this 2-hour race. So we are at the first quarter mark, and we can see that right now, Jamie Dory here feeling a bit of pressure from Delmont as Delmont goes low. And I think Dory they're backing off a little bit by the looks of things, where it may just be the overspeed. These LMP2 cars pick up a huge overspeed in the Slipstream Dragon as they make the way down in to turn number 1. You can see that Adam Delmont here wasting no time in coming on through, but whilst they roll on through at turn 1 into turn 2, it is the case now Dory will go hunting a little bit later on, I suspect, and be patient for the time being. Meanwhile, battling into turn 1 right now in the battle for P3 in the GT3 AM class, it is the case that Matthew Addy here going for the switchback versus Stuart Taylor. Not able to find it initially, but now he's got the run through too. But you can see there Stuart Taylor going very defensive on that inside line, but he's locking Addy to the outside there by going deep under braking, and Addy was looking for the cutback, but he couldn't get the cutback because Stuart Taylor lined up the rear of the car perfectly. And what this has done is actually brought Nigel Stock into the picture, and we're right on board here with the Mercedes driver, the Mercedes AMG GT3 driver, as he makes his way into turn 5. And you can see that Stock going very deep into the corner, and this is to give him exit. What Stock's trying to do here is let the two drivers in front of him fight and then get the traction out the corner for the acceleration zone, so that way he can use one of the key strengths of the Mercedes, which is its straight line speed, to his advantage. But a poor exit there out turn 6 has actually held him back considerably, and you can see just how bad that exit is. That gap, which was 3/10 of a second, has opened up to almost 7/10, and that's a 4/10 of a second gap, which will close here under slipstream conditions. But you can see already Stuart Taylor doing little weaves down to the lower bank and then back up to the high bank as they now go onto the flat surface in the run to the bus stop. And Taylor is getting worried as they make their way into the bus stop chicane. Addy takes a peek here, and Stock has to just watch. And as they roll on through, well, I do think it's the case that Addy now signalling he really wants to get that P3 position off of Taylor. And of course, what that will mean as they make their way on towards another lap very shortly, that for Stuart Taylor right now, he will drop away from Edmonds and Oosterhuis, who are right now 5.2 seconds up the road in the battle for the lead of the GT3 AM class. And instead now the TGC Racing driver has to think, does he let this battle for P3 go, or does he fight it? If he fights it, it will of course mean that he will lose more time to the leaders. But if he lets it go, will he be able to come back? And we see Matthew Addy there going round the outside, and will he be able to get the door shut in time? Just about. And I think Taylor there was of two minds whether to continue to fight it, given that gap to Edmonds and Oosterhuis has opened up to 5.5 seconds. But Matthew Addy has now found his way into P3 in the GT3 AM class, and well, I think Addy is continuing to build that momentum at a good rate as they come charging on through. But as they make the way down in towards turn number 5, we are hearing from Martin Brinkworth there in the Facebook chat that it is almost like Noah's Ark 2x2, hurrah, hurrah, in the GT3 Pro class, particularly in the lead. And well, I can tell you that right now with Giovinazzi continue to lead this one, having started on pole. Our guest driver here is holding off Matt Caruana, but Caruana is staying right there with him. The two Audi R8s, of course, being equal machinery, this being a fixed setup series, they are not allowed to tweak the setup of the car. I think there's some minor tweaks allowed on brake bias, but that's it. But you can see right now Matt Caruana tucked in behind our leader, and Callum Regarton only 2 tenths behind and inching closer. And it's the Altitude Esports driver of what is Callum Regarton and also Tom Edmonds there behind him. I think they're thinking about the strategy right now and how much fuel they can save whilst watching the leaders make their way into the opening corner once again, because they're not putting any pressure on Caruana at this time. And I think there's an Excite Racing driver there of Skinner, who's P2 in the LMP2 Pro class. As he gets it a little bit wrong into turn 2, he has to actually take a wheel off the road there in order to give himself the space. It is the case of Dan Skinner right now chasing after Chris Daines, but Daines is already up to 5.1 second advantage and trying to pull off into the distance as they come rolling on through. And you can see there as we look to Gaz Williams coming through as well, and the next gen racing driver will, I think, be a little bit annoyed at the fact that he's caught the traffic at the wrong time. But Adam Delmont as well. Now Delmont is showing a lot of pace here. Delmont right now is the fastest man in the LMP2 Pro class, and he is really starting to build up. I think Delmont's been doing some fuel saving early in this race, or he's just not quite got himself into a rhythm, and now he's finding that rhythm, but unfortunately, he caught all the GT3 traffic in the infield there. That has cost him what is 4.5 tenths to Gaz Williams, and it means he will not be in the tow zone when they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane this time. He is getting a little bit of a distant tow, but nothing like what he would have liked in order to try and gain those places. But as he makes his way through the bus stop chicane, and our GT3 drivers do the same, we see Jamie Dory coming on through, and then Robert Sunik not too far behind. It is the case that as the LMP2s come up, and this is the thing with multi-class racing, particularly at Daytona, there are places where you want to catch the GT3s when you are in the faster class of what is the LMP2s, and there's places where you don't want to catch them. The place you do not want to catch them is that infield section, because it can cost you whole seconds worth of race time. Conversely, if you catch them up on the banking, you can get the draft off them, particularly if they're running their own little sequence, like the GT3 Pros here, although Giovinazzi has got a little bit of a gap to Caruana this time around of 6 tenths, but it is closing, and you can get a bit of a tow and also come on through quite easily. And that is the challenge of this series, of course, in the different classes. It's a challenge in itself. You need to be mindful of the fact you've got a different class out on circuit, and at the same time you're battling with your peers in class. Now, speaking of battling with peers, we do see that William Foyle, in the meantime, is gradually catching up to what is the back there of Matthew Hodges. In fact, he's been doing so as we're hearing that Gamble Rasmussen has jumped to the pits again. It is not going at Gamble Rasmussen's way after that instant where he got it wrong into turn 1 and went into the pit lane wall, and he's had another jump to the pits. And I think it could be the case that we may, if the damage is too much, see an early retirement from Gamble Rasmussen, meaning we have had 2 retirees of what is McConey and Gamble Rasmussen if they can't get the car back out on circuit. But you can see here William Foyle in the McLaren MP4 12C going hunting after Matthew Hodges as they come down into turn number 1 here. The flames flickering from the rear of that McLaren as he downshifts under braking, but not able to find a way on through. He did earlier on find a way past both Ben Payne and Scott McLean, so it is the case of course those GT3 AM drivers, McLean being William Foyle's teammate in the GT3 AM class, but Foyle in the GT3 Pro class, and now Foyle battling with one of his peers here. And it's not gone his way, of course. Foyle in that instant with Stefan Albanese coming up at this corner at turn number 4 earlier on, but it still is the case. There's plenty of time to go, and what we did see at Mosport last time out, just how many drivers dropped it at the Canadian circuit in the feature race, and that was only an hour. Of course, here today we are here for 2 hours. Will anybody be dropping it come the end of the race? We'll find out. But meanwhile, speaking of dropping it into the pit, with Gaz Williams not pitting, he's up to P2, but Dan Skinner, the first of our LMP2 Pro class drivers into the pit. So is Adam Delmont behind him, the Excite Racing driver. We've also got Jamie Dory coming on in, and Robert Dasunik. They all pile in, and well, now it's a battle on who's got the faster pit stop, the faster pit crew. We'll find out in short order. But meanwhile, we look from the pit lane to the GT3 Pros who come on through, and this is the problem with regards to those fuel tanks. Of course, you do not want to pit out sequence with your peers, because if you pit out sequence, it may help you initially in giving you some clear track, but of course if you don't have the slipstream, then you lose out when you need it most, and that is on the straights or the curved banking. As we're hearing that Skinner's the first to leave his pit box, we're seeing out of our pit box, out of our commentary box window, I should say, and as all the drivers make their way around right now, Giovinazzi continues to lead this GT3 Pro pack, and I will put my money on if he ducks into the pit in the next couple of laps, you will see everybody else behind him duck into the pits, or at least the majority, because they will want that tow. The only driver I can imagine would not do that would be Matt Caruana, because I think he may feel he has a little bit more pace to unleash when he's got clear air, but then again, so it's not so. Caruana is a very fast driver, but he's also a very strategic driver, and we'll have to wait and see whether he does come in with his peers or whether he decides to go long. But I can tell you that as they make their way down towards the bus stop here, will Caruana look for that opportunity? He takes a peek at it. He's thinking about it. It's definitely on his mind now. Can he go for it? As Gaz Williams is into the pit lane. Adam Delmont's also pitted from the LMP2 Pro class. And, well, Delmont has come out of the rear of the class. And we can see here Caruana not gaining on what is Giovinazzi, not making a move. But meanwhile, Gareth Williams coming into the pits. Well, where is Dan Skinner, the driver who pitted only moments ago? Well, Skinner has come back out ahead of Phil McDougall, Jamie Dory and Robert Dasunik, and as they make the way on around here, well, Alistair Kirk is in fact in P4 right now, but I think Alistair Kirk had a much earlier pit stop unless I'm mistaken, so we'll find out about that very shortly. And we have had it confirmed that Rasmussen had an incident on his own at the bus stop. Retirement confirmed. Thank you, Martin, for confirming that. Martin Brinkworth in the Facebook chat, of course, what is one of our race organisers at NXTGEN Racing, and also our race steward tonight. He'll be deploying the safety car when it's needed, and also keeping an eye on proceedings, making sure everything's going A-OK. But Skinner comes on through, and now where is Gaz Williams? He's left his pit box here. It's going going to be close, but I think, unless I'm very much mistaken, I think Gaz Williams has made the jump here and beaten what is Skinner to the punch. Skinner's coming down into turn 1. I think Gareth Williams has got this. He comes on out. He's going across the pit limiter line. There it goes. And as he builds himself up to speed, it's going to be very close. But Williams has jumped up into P3. He's got ahead of Skinner. Now, has he underfueled to achieve this? There is Skinner. That's how close it is in the end. It's 1.5 seconds. 1 second, in fact, and less as they come out of the horseshoe there at turn number 3. But right now, Skinner has lost a place, and Gaz Williams is up into P3 in the LMP2 Pro class. And that is all through strategy and having a shorter pit stop. As they make their way through, we're hearing that Chris Daines is now into the pits as well. He's coming for the first of his scheduled stops. And we just take a brief moment to take a look back at what happened to our GT3 AM driver of Gamble Rasmussen. Well, this was a little bit earlier in the race, approximately about 5 to 6 minutes ago, unless I'm mistaken, and coming through the bus stop here, makes way through the rear, kicks out there through turn number 9, and the car has gone and it's into the wall, and I can appreciate there with that impact into the wall, a jump to the pits, and I think a retirement there, given the fact that he will have another fast repair available, but he was already a lap down with his teammate. And I think it may be the case the team have decided, you know what, it's better to retire the car at this point. You can completely understand that, given the fact they're quite a way down, unless it is the case, of course, that damage is insurmountable and he's had to use 2 fast repairs already, but I think he's only had to use the 1. But regardless, it is the case he'll come back fighting strong, I'm sure, in round number 5. He'll need just a bit of time to see how he can improve on what's happened today. But meanwhile, Robert Asunik here under that pressure from Jamie Doria as Ed Lack into the pit lane from P2 of the LMP2 Pro class. And Chris Daines has come out of the pit. And as he's made his way on out, I should clarify that he has come out the best part of what is my goodness, well, that is now a gap and a half of 9 seconds, or just shy of 9 seconds to Gaz Williams. Well, Chris Daines going on as he plans to proceed, and that is to be absolutely dominant in the LMP2 class, or at least so far. We've still got plenty of time, but we can't get distracted by the fact that right now, looking from LMP2s to GT3s, Nigel Stock has just found his way past what is their Stuart Taylor, and well, I think it's the case that Nigel Stock now starting to unleash the beast that is that V8 in the front of that Mercedes. How did he make the move out here, you ask? Well, let's take a look. So as he made his way there onto the start-finish line, it was the case that Taylor put himself in the middle of the road there, so he did force Stock to be squeezed that inside very slightly, but he's opened the steering, and I think in the end it was the case that Taylor recognising there's no point fighting this, given that pit window is fast approaching, as we see here Stock moving up gradually, now up into that P3 position, and Nigel Stock, to be fair, in the since Mosport has really demonstrated increasing pace. He picked up that win, of course, in the sprint race Mosport, and he's showing ever increasing form here, and I do wonder whether it's the case that for Nigel Stock this could really be the turning point of his calendar, because he's always had a lot of pace. He's never quite had that opportunity to demonstrate it, but now he is. And speaking of demonstrating things, it's the case that Antonio Giovinazzi now comes into the pits to demonstrate the rough point where it expects now GT3 Pro drivers to come on into the pits for their scheduled stop. Johnny Deschamps also in there, and Eduardo Franceschin comes in for the DRS Esport Elements 1 team, but staying out, and we said there might be a split, and it is the case that Matt Caruana has stayed out. He has not pitted, and Callum Regarton has literally said, okay Matt, if you're staying out, I'm staying with you, because I think I've got the pace to hang with you, as they make the way down to turn number 5. And as they roll on through here, it is the case that right now, well, if this works out for the pair of them, they could really jump up their way ahead of Giovinazzi and break the gap to what is Deschamps, and behind the pair of them, Tom Edmonds has actually dropped away a little bit. Now we can see the rear brake discs in particular of Tom Edmonds there, the carbon ceramics in that Porsche 911 glowing red hot. I wonder whether those brakes are just taking a little bit of a battering at the rear at the moment, and that may be costing him a bit of lap time compared to Callum Regarton, who may be just managing those brakes a little bit better by comparison. Tom Edmonds, of course, no stranger to the Porsche 911, the car that he's always picked when racing in the NXTGEN Racing Series in GT3 class, but right now it is the case, I think, for Edmonds, just losing a little bit of pace, as meanwhile, whilst all this is going on, I can tell you that Nigel Stock is now the leader of the GT3 AM class, because we have all of what are our GT3 AM leaders into the pits. Morten Oosthuus first and foremost into the pits. We also have coming in we've got Matthew Addy. Matt Edmonds is out on circuit, however, he pitted earlier than the rest of them. This is going to be close as Edmonds makes his way into turn 1. Where's Oosthuus? He's coming on out. That's Matt Edmonds has got the lead. Well, effectively, what we believe then is the lead of the GT3 AM class, and we didn't catch his pit stop because we're so focused on the GT3 Pros and the LMP2 Pros coming in, but it is is the case that Matt Edmonds now, when Nigel Stock pits, will be your de facto leader in the GT3 AM class, and he's got an advantage to Mortenusa, who's here, of what is 5 seconds. Now, of course, before that pit stop occurred, it was the other way round. This was ahead of Edmonds, but it looks as though with that, Edmonds has just found some space out on the circuit and has got the job done. But will it come back to bite him later? Of course, the fact that Ustus will have some slightly fresher tyres right now by comparison as they make the way on through. But I believe both drivers have not changed tyres, or they've changed identical tyres in that stop. It's just the case that Ustus has had a slightly slower run over the course of that transition stint too. And as they make the way on around right now, the gap in the end says it all. It was a 4-second delta between Edmonds and Ustus, and that is what has led to the switch. But meanwhile, we look from our GT3 Pro, GT3 AM class to our GT3 Pros, and into the pits is Tom Edmonds here. He makes his way on out. Now, where's Antonio Giovinazzi? Giovinazzi is coming through turn number 1 right now. This is going to be very close as night descends on the Daytona circuit here in Florida. And as they make their way down, it looks as though there Giovinazzi just manages to creep ahead of McLean, and Edmonds is right there. Edmonds has not been able to jump Giovinazzi. He's closed up to him, but it's the case he's not been able to jump the driver as they make their way through the left-hander at turn 4. And well, Edmonds at this point will be absolutely livid, I can imagine, at the fact that has not worked out strategically. And well, should he have pitted 1 lap earlier? That is the question, because right now Giovinazzi seems to have got the upper hand, and into the pits come the leaders of the GT3 Pro class, and there they are, Callum Regarton and also Matt Caruana. Now, Callum Regarton, as I understand it, was behind Matt Caruana coming into the pit, so whether he's jumped ahead there before the pit limiter line and whether he could be subject to potentially a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane, we'll wait and find out. But that is a little bit of a side-by-side moment coming into the pits, but they're both being searched. Where's Giovinazzi right now, here you ask, because they were behind Giovinazzi when the pit stop started to occur. Well, they're making their way down to the bus stop chicane as they've rolling through it. I can tell you also Nigel Stock has come in from the lead of the GT3 AM class. He's re-emerging in P6 in the class right now after his pit stop, but Giovinazzi here comes rolling on through, and well, Garton and Caruana are still being serviced. They're still stationary, but Matt Caruana has now left his pit box, and it's going to be close here as we see Callum Regarton just coming out behind. So in the end, it is the case that Callum Regarton literally attached to the back of Matt Caruana's car as they come out of this pit. My goodness, these two, I think they're going to be with one another until one of them drops it, or it's the case they get to that checkered flag, because the pair are inseparable right now as they make their way through turn 1 and down towards turn number 2. Giovinazzi, meanwhile, coming out of turn number 1 right now, and I think it's not quite enough. He's not really close enough. He's not indeed. In fact, he has lost out there by what is a margin, as our time screen is updated, of 2 seconds to Callum Regarton and Matt Caruana. So that is effectively a 2.5 second swing in the pit lane, and now Matt Caruana has the ultimate job of holding that advantage and trying to break away from Callum Regarton. And now the question will be, of course, for Callum Regarton, does he try to battle with Caruana to pull Giovinazzi and Tom Edmonds up to the pair of them now? He'll want Tom Edmonds in particular to come up. That will be the challenge. But of course, with that, he's going to bring Giovinazzi in, given that Edmonds is behind Giovinazzi as they make their way up onto the bank into turn number 7. And as they roll them through here, we will wait and see. But meanwhile, a little bit further back in the battle for what is P5 in the GT3 Pro class, we can see William Voll here closing up to the back of Matthew Hodges. They've been like this for some time, to be fair. And the McLaren, from what we understand, were the weaker cars on the straight, much like the Porsche. Well, we used to expect the Porsche to be, but it seems to be quite strong here today at Daytona. But the McLaren there just tucked in behind Hodges, who in the Ferrari, in one of the faster cars in terms of top speed on the straights. The problem with the Ferrari, however, is its acceleration in its top gears can be a little bit lacking. The slipstream, however, is a bit of a different story. So right now, I think Hodges really pulling the McLaren along behind him, and the two of them staying nose to tail as they roll on through. And we reach that 48-minute mark as they come on through. And we say hello there in the Facebook chat to Mark Fletcher, who's cheering on the Altitude Esports drivers, and in particular, of course, that will be Callum Regarton. Matthew Hodges peels into the pit lane, releasing William Voll. We were just looking at moments ago, and with the Altitude Esports drivers of Callum Regarton and also Tom Edmonds here, both in the GT3 Pro class, and of course we have the absence of Billy Fletcher as of tonight. But as they make their way on through right now, of course, with the headlights now fully on, we do have that night time in what is the race, and as they make their way through, this is where, of course, it gets a little bit more difficult for our drivers because visibility drops. They do have the arena lighting, of course, particularly in the infield section. In fact, all the way around the circuit, it is to be said, But the challenge will be that brake markers can suddenly disappear. If you're looking for a very distinct brake marker, which is very visible in daylight, but it's the case, it disappears in the darkness. Until then, you've got to find a new brake marker or just be a bit extra observant. And that's where the little mistakes can creep in. Haven't had the opportunity to do some day to night into day at transition racing myself. I can definitely tell you it is one of the things that as a sim racer, and I would definitely presume a real world racer, you've got to have your brake markers on point and get ready for those changing light conditions. Of course, here at this circuit, we do have lighting all the way around the circuit, and that does help out somewhat compared to some of the more continental circuits that this series will race at later on in the season. But Edmonds right now behind Giovinazzi here, and well, Giovinazzi has fallen away a little bit. Lap times last time out, well, we haven't really got a comparator at the moment, given the fact that our two leaders in the GT3 Pro class have currently got their pit out laps registered, but at the end of this lap we'll find out. But we do look to leaders right now, and we particularly right on board the gearbox here of Matt Caruana, the Roman Grosjean Academy driver from GTWR, just holding off Cameron Garton. But you can see Garton taking his time here. He's saving fuel, he's being smart. He knows if they battle, they will pull this two-way fight for the lead into a four-way fight, if not into a potential five-way fight. As they make their way in to turn number one, and once again, it should be said as they come on through here that both drivers showing a lot of patience. They are showing strategic nuance here, and it's very key as they go deeper into this race. We do expect at some point Caruana will try and make the break. There is no doubt about that, but he's not going for it anytime soon. The only time he may suddenly go for it is if Cameron Garton has a really bad corner, such as one of these hairpins in the infield section, and he's able to then try and go for the break, but that will be at his discretion. But as they make the way down into turn 5 right now, things have opened up a little bit across the classes, I can tell you. The only class where there's major battling afoot towards the front right now is the GT3 Pro class, whereas now it's opened up in the other two classes, and now we are patiently waiting to see how the strategies play out. As Caruana there goes a little bit deep into turn 6, and Cameron Garton is able to close up there, and the first noticeable mistake goes to Caruana. But you can see as they make their way up on the banking here at 70, it's not enough to trigger an event, but what it does mean is that with that, now the gap to Antonio Giovinazzi behind has gone from 1.9 seconds down to 1.5 seconds. It is closing, and that is what these two will not want to have happen. It's for it to turn into that four-way fight as they roll into the bus stop. Now, as they come on through, we can see behind there, that is Chris Daines, our race leader in the LMP Pro class, making his way on through the bus stop and coming up on the high line versus the GT3 drivers. And it does seem to be all going to plan right now for Chris Daines, as we hear that Stefan Albanese is into the pits from what was P10 in the GT3 Pro class. And he's having a scheduled stop here, but Chris Daines happily marching his way on. And meanwhile, we can see in our GT3 Pro leaders is the case that now Cameron Garton giving a little bit of a bump draft there to Caruana just to try and push him along and make up some time lost. As they make the way down to turn 1 once again, it is the case that we do look to our GT3 AM class by comparison, and I can tell you that right now lead in the class here, and this is a position that he'll be familiar with, and well, every time he's been up front, it's been a difficult rest of the race for him. That is Matt Edmonds, of course, the NXTGEN Racing with Sam Case's UK driver, and I'm not saying he can't hold on to a lead, but he has had a lot of misfortune when he has been the leader of his class, whether at Daytona or other circuits, and well, we do hope that the commentator's curse will not strike him here today, but it's the case right now. Edmonds does seem to be in control of his race as he makes his way onwards to another lap here, and as he comes across that timeline, he has got an advantage of 7.5 seconds to P2 man Morten Oosterhuis, and it was the case that in the pits Oosterhuis dropped 4.5 seconds in the pits versus what was Matt Edmonds, and that is what led to the two of them switching places. It was on the pit stop time as they make their way on around, and also the fact that Edmonds decides a bit earlier than the rest of his peers by a lap, if not 2 laps, and then as a result in doing so has given himself quite the undercut advantage, but that may come back to bite him in the backside a little bit later on, of course, with regards to the tyre wear rate, but we will wait and find out. But then it is Matthew Addy in P3, and Matthew Addy here, well, since the pit stop, he's broken away from Stuart Taylor, and I think Stuart Taylor's had a couple of offs since then, to be fair, and as they roll them through right now, we can see Matthew Addy coming through the left hand here and looking quite comfortable in that 3rd place position. The NXTGEN Racing with Sam Case's UK driver, he would love to go after Oosterhuis and also Edmonds, but I think right now he's focusing more on that P3 position and consolidating his advantage over Stuart Taylor before looking to move further up. And looking all the way down to the bottom of the GT3 AM class, and the driver we should actually introduce today, we have not seen him race since the season opener, but he's making his debut in the season as of today. The TGC bottom split Heroes driver of Jordan Pope here, as he makes his way through turn 5 and up into 6 in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo. And as he rolls him through the left-hander, he's currently P10 in the GT3 M class. He's had an off a brief moment ago. He's currently 56 seconds off of Alexander Patak. Patak into the pit lane, I do believe, for a scheduled stop here, but Pope continues to soldier. And that's what we love to see, of course. Drivers of all skill levels racing in this series and staying in there when the going gets tough. And Jordan Pope definitely keeping to his guns right now and pressing on here with just over an hour and 5 minutes to go. Perhaps he'll gain a place or two as we go ever deeper into the race. You never know. As he rolls on through, it is the case that we look from Jordan Pope to Jamie Dory in the LMP PRO class. And we can see here is the case that the next-gen racing driver, well, he has fallen a little bit of the way off of what is Robert de Sunic. That gap has opened up by a sizable margin here for Jamie Dory. And what I do think for the next-gen racing driver at this point, he'll be looking to the pit stop window indeed. Most of our drives will be to see what happens in that second stop. Now, I can tell you, in terms of the pit time loss, or the pit time, I should really say, that the vast majority of our drivers, whether it be in the LMP PRO class or the GT3 classes, all having their pit stops last around the region of 1 minute and 11 seconds, which is a sign there of it being a stop where they've simply, I think, gone for a fill up of the fuel tank and perhaps the change of 1 or 2 tyres, but not the full set of tyres. And we do have some longer pit stops anticipated later on, as into the pits comes William Foyle. Now, William Foyle, unless I'm very much mistaken, after that off earlier on, I'm not sure. I know he's had a pit stop. I think this is, if this is going to be his second scheduled stop, then it's going to be very early. But I suspect this may be an early, or so this may be a late first stop, unless I'm mistaken on the strategy stakes. But he's gained a lot of race time, William Foyle, and his laps have been very impressive as well. He has not been too far off of his peers, including the race leaders here in the GT3 Pro class of Caruana and Garton. And as they make their way down through what is turn number 4 here, so I should say Reed Garton, his name in full, being polite, it is the case that as Matt Caruana leads this class, where you can see in the rear of the picture, there's Antonio Giovinazzi, and Tom Edmonds has closed up as well. And this is a sign, I think, of things to come, where it's this 4-way fight for what is the GT3 Pro class lead and the eventual win of this race. And as they roll them through the left-hander, well, we will have to wait and see how it all plays on out. But what I can also tell you is that we have had the confirmed retirement of, I believe, what is Phil McDougall in the LMP2 Pro class. He's shown on our screens as retired, which is very unfortunate for the CXR Project Black driver. And also, we have Alexander Patak in the pits. He's been in the pits for a sizable amount of time. Whether they're doing repair works to the car, well, we'll have to wait and find out. But they're not moving at the moment. They are working on the car. They're trying to get it back out of the pit lane, but no success so far. We'll have to wait and see. And that would be an absolute blow for Hilliard Esports, who have had 2 drivers have their races in despair, and only one of them, that's Morten Oosthuus, who's running P2 in the GT3 class. But Tom Edmonds right now, our focus of this camera shot, currently chasing after Antonio Giovinazzi and doing everything he can in order to stay in that battle for the lead here, just staying in the toe of the Audi driver in front of him. Now, speaking of a GT3 Pro driver who recently made a pit stop, we talked about him only moments ago, William Foyle here, where he's come all the way back out in P10. His pit time was 1 minute and 42 seconds, which would indicate, I think, a tyre change, all 4 compounds potentially being changed. And I think now for William Foyle, he will be looking at trying to gain places out in circuit by simply putting the pace down, I should say. Now, as he makes his way through turn number 5 here and heads up towards 6, Foyle keeping it nice and smooth for the time being, but of course he does have Nigel Stock in front of him at the GT3 AM driver. Remember, there are no points for a GT3 AM driver beating a GT3 Pro or vice versa. They've all got to keep it smart. But whilst this is happening, hold up a second, we're here and Antonio Giovinazzi is now into P2 here. He's just found his way past what is, I believe, and that's Cameron Garton he's just passed. Now, what exactly has happened here is the question. Has Reed Garton made a mistake? Well, whatever's happened here, it is now the Audi driver who's in P2 in the GT3 Pro class. And well, you can see it, Cameron Garton getting very close here to the back of the privateer as they make their way across towards where is the bus stop chicane in a very short moment. Now, Giovinazzi putting the car in the middle of the road. Cameron Garton thinking about this. I don't think he's going to dare to go for it, though. I think he wants to be patient. He's worried about losing time if they battle into the chicane. But Cameron Garton definitely unsettled by something as they make their way on through. We will take a look back at what happened moments ago, whether it was a bit of a lock-up into a corner. But as they make their way down what is onto turn number 12 here and up onto that banking, it is the case that Matt Caruana, well, if he can get the 3 behind him to fight, I think he'll be feeling very comfortable as we head into the second hour of this race, because right now it is looking as though Caruana is really having to dictate the pace, and everyone's having to play follow on. As we see there, Giovinazzi takes the lead of the class. He goes down the low line there. Caruana stays high, gives him the space on the inside into one, and I think Caruana now recognising that where he's been leading this class for so long on this second stint, he now needs to do some fuel saving or just back it off. And you see Rick Garton there taking a little bit of a sniff at the back of Caruana. I wonder whether Rick Garton is itching to try and take the lead and break away, because Tom Edmonds there as well, not quite on the pace by comparison. I think Edmonds was more caught out by the fact they did have Delmont coming through. That's Adam Delmont in the LMP2 Excite Racing Machine coming through. He's in P6 in class, but as they make their way into it's turn 5, you can see Callum Regarton having to go a little bit wide, give the LMP2 the space. What, of course, Regarton is capitalising on or hoping is that then it will be the case that Delmont does a similar thing into turn 6, but Delmont does no such thing on Matt Caruana. Instead, he waits to go up on the banking here, and this could hurt Callum Regarton a little bit as they make their way onto turn number 7. He will have lost a little bit of time. But we take a look back at what exactly happened for Callum Regarton to lose that place only moments ago. When we can get our replay footage, ladies and gentlemen, give us a brief moment. Well, this was only months ago, and this was Antonio Giovinazzi, so he made the move. Now, Callum Regarton, well, it was the case he was tucked in behind Caruana, and Giovinazzi just said, you know, if you're going to give me the space on the inside, I'm going to go for it. And I think Regarton may have also left the door open intentionally there. It's a little bit of a semi-what-if situation in terms of did he leave the door open, did he not? But I think Callum Regarton may have just left that door open and said, you know what, let's change up the order a little bit here. I now want to be in the double toe by comparison with just being in the toe of Caruana. So a lot of positioning going on here. It's almost like a chess game, in fact. Everybody's sort of thinking 4 steps ahead of their opponent and trying to play the long strategic game here rather than what we typically see. Of course, remember, this is a super endurance round. It's the only race day. It's 2 hours long. We're just past the hour mark. We do not have only 1 hour for the feature. We don't have a 15-minute sprint. It is the case we have 2 hours of racing. We've already completed 1 hour of it, and Daytona, as we have mentioned, is a very tactical circuit. It's all about pace, but it's also about knowing that you can push for pace, because this time it is the case that all 4 of our drivers in the battle for the GT3 Pro lead all thinking about the fuel, thinking about how can they make this stint longer, how can they shorten their time in the pit lane, and if they can shorten it enough, they may just undercut their rivals when it matters most. But with an hour complete, it's only fair that we can now, as we see it, we say hello there to Billy Fletcher Racing in the Twitch chat, who says, hope tonight's going well. Well, indeed, I think, Billy, for your teammates, particularly Callum Regarton and also Tom Edmonds, both of them are enjoying a good run of form right now. We were just about to tell the story of the order, but it is the case they're running P3, P4 in the GT3 Pro class and literally surgically attached to the back of the leaders of Matt Caruana and Antonio Giovinazzi in the GT3 Pro class. But the story after an hour then. So in the LMP2 Pro class, it is the case that after starting at the back of the field because of his championship lead, Chris Daines has made his way into the lead of the LMP2 Pro class. He made his way there after the opening 25 or so minutes, and the Renault Motorsport driver is continuing to gradually inch out an advantage versus his peers of Gareth Williams, I should say. Although Gaz Williams is starting to close him up a little bit, the P2 driver here really has been the best of the rest in class and is trying to find a way to take the fight to Daines over the remainder of the distance. It's Dan Skinner in P3, meanwhile the Excite Racing driver here, who was running P2 for a sizable amount of time in the class. The pit window saw Gaz Williams undercut Skinner and find a way to jump him. And in the end now, Skinner is having to try and play catch-up, and the two of them with that identical pit time, I think, telling the story in itself there. And then we do have what is Robert Asuni in P4, who right now really building up pace as well and chasing after the leaders, trying to catch up to the top 3, and he is now 6.7 seconds off of Skinner. Then it is Jamie Dory who rounds up the top 5 there in the LMP2 Pro class, and right now Dory in a bit of a no man's land, not really gaining, not really losing. Adam Delmont in P6 there of the class, and Delmont, having had a difficult start to the race, is pressing on all the same to pick up some valuable points. He's 14 seconds behind Dory, but 12.5 seconds ahead of Edward Lack, and of course there was that contact between what was, I believe it was Delmont and Lack early in the race. I think it was after the opening lap, or the opening 2 laps, there was contact on the banking at turn 12, which saw both drivers have to jump to the pits. When in the end they pulled into the pits, I should say, and it's the case that both of them are now trying to recover their races. And Alistair Kirk, the last of our LMP2 class runners, he's only 1.1 seconds off of Ed Lack, having had a difficult race so far. We had the retirement of Phil McDougall about 6 laps ago. It was the case with difficulties with the car, Phil McDougall having to come into the pits. They weren't able to get the car back out again. Meanwhile, whereas the LMP2 Pro class is a little bit spaced out right now, it is the case in the GT3 Pro class. Well, the story has been, having started on... Oh, goodness me, as soon as we cut to, he gets a bit wrong there. And the... Oh, goodness, and it's the Altitude Esports drivers who bump into what was the wayward car of Antonio Giovinazzi there, as Tom Edmonds had nowhere to go, and Callum Regarton as well. And as soon as we cut to it, it seems like it's all gone wrong. And Antonio Giovinazzi losing the rear end. He's jumped to the pit, and we were about to say, well, it was Giovinazzi who's led it from what was the start of the race up to that point, running a very consistent pace, and one mistake there has cost him dearly as Tom Edmonds has pulled into the pit lane. Callum Regarton soldiers on, and well, now it is Matt Caruana who leads the class. Well, that was a very sudden turn of events, and let's just take a look back at exactly what has happened there. So this was at the start of the lap, in fact, and Matt Caruana here putting that pressure on Giovinazzi going into turn number 1, and we're trying to find a way round, but in the end Giovinazzi holding him at bay on that defensive inside line as they made the way down through 2 and up into 3. But a little bit later on, this is where the problem started, and that is they made the way on in. Well, Giovinazzi just loses the rear through the bus stop, and Caruana in the end, well, now that was an absolute nightmare moment for everybody in the sequence, in the fact that Caruana came through, but he was tapped on the back by Callum Regarton. And as we take a look back at what happened there once again, well, Callum Regarton's going to have nowhere to go as we ride on board, and you can see Caruana has to stamp on the brakes there, and then in tapping the back of what is Caruana, Regarton, and manages to go to the left of the wayward Audi, and it is in the end, it is what is Tom Edmonds who pays the price for being in that. As we ride on board here with Tom Edmonds, you can see he literally cannot see what's happened until the worst possible moment, and in the end it is Giovinazzi who's right. He gets a face full of the wayward Audi, and Edmonds into the pits as a result. That is very unfortunate, because at that point in time it was the case the top 4 running nose to tail and in a real tactical battle, but Caruana now is leading in the GT3 Pro class by 1.7 seconds after that drama, ahead of Callum Regarton. But to be fair, the two of them have been pretty much attached to one another in terms of pace throughout. Neither one of them has shown an advantage, and now it's Jean-Louis Deschamps who finds himself up into P3. I think the Delta Motorsport driver here was running P5, and he's been running very comfortably outside of the pace of those top 4 until the incident occurred there. But it is the case that Deschamps right now really looking to cruise to what might be a very comfortable result and a podium, a well-earned podium as he makes his way on through. Then we do have Gavin Gardner here in P4, the Verano Motorsport driver, looking very, very smooth and comfortable in terms of pace, but it hasn't quite worked out in terms of the pace versus his peers, although right now running well in that P4 position. I think he's just focusing on getting home some solid points tonight and making sure he keeps himself well in it in the standings. We then have completing our top 5 in the GT3 Pro class, Eduardo Francochin for DRS Esport LMS1, who really, much like Gavin Gardner, has had a quiet race. He's 10.8 seconds off of Gardner, but again, sometimes a quiet race is a good one, and just continue to push on here after what was a difficult day at Mosport last week. Then Carmelo Martello in at P6 here, and again the DRS Esport LMS1 driver has had a couple of mistakes from what I understand, and that's why he's down in P6. I think he has got the pace to be a bit further up there, but that's why he's dropped down. He's 11.5 seconds off of Francochin, and Tom Edmonds having left the pit lane with that repair work, and it may also be an early tactical stop as well, so he'll get his second stop out of the way with the fast repair, and now the Altitude Esports driver has got it all to do in less than 55 minutes of the race remaining, plus the final lap, of course. We then have Matthew Hodges in P8 here, and Matthew Hodges has had a difficult day, and indeed it's been a difficult one for CXR Project Black as a whole here, with their LMP2 Pro Class drivers of Ed Lack and also Phil McDougall having a difficult start to the race, and the retirement of Phil McDougall and Hodges here pressing on in P8. And well, he has got William Foyle, who is the best part of 2.2 seconds behind him. Here is William Foyle in the McLaren, the Crest Autosport of Apex Tracks driver in P9. A little bit of rivalry building between the two of them, and we'll wait to see how that plays out later on in tonight's proceedings. And it is Lee Horn who completes the top 10 of our GT3 Pro class. Lee Horn earlier on in the race having a major moment which cost him very dearly, and the Next Gen Racing with Sam Case's UK driver pressing on just to try and get home some points on the board. And then outside that top 10, the last of our runners, our remaining runners in the GT3 Pro class, there is Stefan Albanese, the DRS Esport LMS2 driver here, who had a major moment earlier on in the race which saw him have to take an emergency pit stop. He is pressing on here in P11. We've also had the recent retirement of Antonio Giovinazzi. That moment and the contact that subsequently occurred at the bus stop chicane has seen Giovinazzi have to retire the car, and we did also lose Maurizio Marconi right towards the start of the race. After picking up some damage, they were not able to get the car repaired for the continuation of the race. But meanwhile, in the GT3 AM class, the story here is one of Matt Emmons, who is leading right now. And I'm very hesitant to say those words. Matt Emmons is leading the GT3 AM class for the simple reason, whenever I've said them in the past, something has then happened afterwards. But we're saying them anyway, because we're telling you the story. And it is the case that Emmons starting in what was the midfield, or towards the rear of the midfield in the GT3 AM class on the grid. He has found his way up the order. He's been displaying great pace, as he was talking to us about in the build-up to tonight's race. He's saying about the fact that he's feeling very strong here at Daytona, and it is definitely showing, because his advantage right now, when he came into the pits in P2 behind what is now second place man Morten S. Oosterhuis, is the case that the difference, as we see there, Ed Lack getting a bit wrong on the exit of turn 3 in the LMP2 machine, is the case that Oosterhuis was ahead by what was 2.5 seconds, but it was a 4.5 second swing in the pit lane, which saw Oosterhuis lose out in the pit stop window and in the end come out in P2. And right now Emmons is pushing on, and well, the two of them are displaying very similar lap time, to be fair, but Emmons just seems to be inching away from Oosterhuis lap after lap. Now, the Hilliard Esport driver is pressing on all the same here, looking for that podium as a minimum, and it's Matthew Addy in P3 right now, the NXTGEN Racing with Sam Case's UK driver, and he is showing increasing pace versus Oosterhuis. The gap between the two of them for the battle for P2, 7.5 seconds, but Addy is closing very gradually, and that last lap he took the best part of what was 0.3 of a second out of Oosterhuis. It could be the case he'll close up a bit later on. In P4, outside the podium, but nonetheless not to be forgotten about, Stuart P. Taylor here. He's soldiering it on. It is the case the TGC racing driver had a good start to his race, was holding on to the lead for a sizable amount of time, but in the end did have to relinquish the lead to Oosterhuis, who showed that ability to come on through. As we see a little bit of disconnection issue there for Taylor, a bit of a latency issue we should say, but he's pressing on in P4, and he has got Ben Payne chasing after him, but Ben Payne is 5.4 seconds back right now. But to be fair, Ben Payne on similar pace to Taylor, and the Crest Autosport Ferrari driver had one of his season best performances. He started off very strong, and he has continued with that mantra all the way through this race right now, and to be fair, you can't fault him. It is the case that the Englishman doing very nicely indeed, and he's holding off Nigel Stock, who Nigel Stock decided to go very long on his opening stint compared to his peers. The overcut did not work out, and as a result he fell back to P6 when he came out the pits, and now he is hunting after Ben Payne once again. P7, meanwhile, we do have Scott McLean here in the GT3 AM class, the Crest Autosport Ferrari driver, who started towards the front, fell down the order, but he's holding a very well-earned P7 right now, with Darren Doherty behind him in P8, and the gap between the two of them there, 47 seconds, with Darren Doherty, I believe, having a couple of moments, and having recently also come into the pits, to be fair, so we could see some trade up there. Darren Doherty taking his second scheduled stop, and then it is the case we have Jordan Pope, the last of our runners, and debutant in the series as of tonight, the TGC bottom split Heroes driver, making his way through turn number 3 there and enjoying the race on his debut, no doubt, as he makes his way around in the Lamborghini Pro car. We've had the retirements of Alexander Batak. I've had that confirmed. That is a retirement for the Hilliard Esport driver Alexander Batak and his teammate of Stefan Gamble Rasmussen. Both drivers experiencing incidents of their own moments, as I understand it, and as a result Hilliard Esports now relying on one driver, and that is Morten Oosterhuis, to try and carry them to that victory tonight, or at least be on that podium. But as we now look a little bit further up the order once again, we're hearing that Edward Lack is into the pit lane from what was at the time P7 in the P7 in the LMP2 Pro class, and Alistair Kirk actually managed to pass Lack out on circuit. How did this happen? Well, it was only moments ago here, and in fact Lack had a bit of a slow run, I'm hearing in my ear, through the bus stop chicane, and Kirk saying I'm going to come down that low line, and well, in doing so I think Lack's going to tuck in behind and peel into the pit. Well, yep, there he goes, and Lack into the pits there. He decided to peel on in, taking the low line. We look back to those live time screens right now, and with that in mind, I can tell you that after the drama at the bus stop chicane, which they've just exited only 3-4 laps ago, it is the case the battle for the lead of the GT3 Pro class, well, we thought it might have calmed down a little bit. It is now back alive once again here, and it's Matt Caruana versus Callery Garton. And now this will seem very familiar to some of you, the fact that Matt Caruana is driving a wounded Audi ARA. He's in the lead of his class and trying to hold on, because that's exactly what happened in the feature race between Matt Caruana and Gavin Gardner last time out at the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, and we've got it here again at what is Daytona. And this man, I can tell you, the Romain Grosjean Academy GTWR driver does not give up no matter what the damage is on the car, unless he has to come in due to what we like to nickname the meatball flag. That is of course the orange and black flag in motorsport. Caruana does not give in as they make the way into turn number 4, and as they roll through the left-hander, It is the case that right now Caruana feeling that pressure from Callum Regarton. Of course, Regarton, you can see the front damage there, and in fact if you put the two cars together they'll be like a jigsaw and they'll fit together with the damage on both cars. But as they make their way into turn at number 5 right now and out into 6, it is the case that Callum Regarton will be pressing on as much as he possibly can here to try and stay with Caruana. Now, as they roll through the two of them last time out, absolutely identical lap times. That shows you how much pace they're putting down. And Matt Emmons sets the fastest lap in his class, the GT3 driver, 44.183. Emmons raising the bar considerably within the class and trying to put that race to bed. Now, we will not take the camera to Matt Emmons there, as we've had requested by Katie Eames, and also there, I believe that's Martin Brinkworth under the NXTGEN Racing tag on Facebook for the simple reason of the commentator's curse. But right now, we continue to focus here on the battle for the GT3 Pro lead, and this gives us a quick moment to take a sip of water, if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, and always remember to stay hydrated. As they make their way down into turn number 1 once again here for them, what is effectively the 53rd time of asking. You see Callum Regarton taking that little sniff of a look up the inside, but not daring to commit to a move, just waiting for that opportunity. Well, as this is going on, Ben Payne, oh goodness me, Ben Payne, they've just gone past him, and Payne has turned at the exit of turn number 1 here. He's got it wrong. What's happened to the AM driver? Coming down into the corner, so it's a typical braking zone for turn 1. The car comes on through. Has he got on the power a bit too soon? No, he's put the left-hand wheels onto the grass, got on the power thinking, that's where the grip is, and the grip's definitely not there. Instead, the car has been fully turned, and Ben Payne there, with a slight mistake, has lost himself P6 in the class. So he's got back up to racing, and Nigel Stock is now, he's lost himself P5 in the class. He's now P6, and it is Nigel Stock, who we look to here in the Crystal Autosport with Apex Tracks Mercedes, who is now up into the top 5. Well, whilst that was happening, I can also tell you that into the pits has come Adam Delmont, Dan Skinner as well. Dan Skinner came in, of course, from what was P3 in the LMP PRO class. Adam Delmont is leaving the pit lane, and Robert De Sunic as well. This is going to be close, and Delmont just literally comes out behind De Sunic. Now, of course, these drivers all battling here, and as we ride on board with Adam Delmont, now this is the most horrible part of a pit exit, I can tell you, is the fact that your rival is literally in front of you. He will get up to speed a tiny bit sooner than you because of the pit limiter, but now they go racing as they come roaring out of the pit lane, and as they make the way on through, we've heard that Jordan Pope has had an instant to jump to the pits, but now it is the case that Adam Delmont pursuing what is Robert De Sunic here as they make the way up towards turn number 5. Now, I think it's the case that for Delmont, he needs to get things a little bit composed in terms of getting himself back up to speed. De Sunic seems to switch things on a little bit sooner, but the front for De Sunic, they've got Morten Uster who's ahead of them, the second place man in the GT3 AM class, and they're both having to navigate the Hilliard eSport machine, and Delmont's had an easier time of it by comparison. Now, if he can nail the exit here through turn 6, this will help him massively in the run round up on the bank in the 7. Jamie Dorey and Alistair Kirk also into the pit lane, I can report out my commentary box window, but Adam Delmont not close enough right now to get into the thick of this as they make their way on through, and as they roll on across and down towards the bus stop chicane here, it is the case that Adam Delmont, well, he's going to have to be patient as they come on down and look for that opportunity a bit later on. But meanwhile, in the pit lane, we have Alistair Kirk. We also have Jamie Dorey here. Of course, these two very close together out on circuit when they came in. And we'll have to wait to see how it plays out in terms of the strategy between them and their peers around them. But we can see here Adam Delmont pressing on as they make their way around the left-hander and down towards the start-finish line. Now, as they come on through, I can tell you that it's the case that Skinner's going to come back up into P3. Delmont here goes down the low line versus De Sunic. Now, I think they're going to jump ahead of both Kirk and Dorey, who are still being serviced in the pit lane. So Delmont into P4, but he goes overly deep there, and De Sunic's going to have the run. Surely he does. He gets the door shut there on the exit of 2, and as they make their way down to turn 3, well, De Sunic has gained that position back just by getting Delmont there to carry a bit too much speed into turn 1 and go overly deep. And the Team Racing Netherlands driver here enjoying this racing, and definitely in this P217 machine, his form is continuing to rise as they make the way into the right hand there of turn number turn at number 5 there and roll on out. But meanwhile, after what was quite a lengthy pit stop, Jamie Dory has come back out in P6, Ed Lack is in P7, and it's Alistair Kirk who is making his way out in P8 when it all is said and done. And well, that is, we believe, the second pit stops. The majority of our LMP2 class drivers all said and done, and now it will be about whether they can make it to the end of the race on their fuel tanks or whether they'll need a third stop. As into the pits is Gareth Williams, so you can see he's up on the jacks there, and that means he is having his tyre changes done now to finish that mandatory tyre pit stop rule, where our drivers need to change all 4 tyres on the car at least once, but they can split it across pit stops or they can do it all in a single stop. But Chris Daines, meanwhile, just happily continuing around on circuit right now, and I think managing this one to the distance. Now, will he pin on in this time around, or will he stay out? I think he's going to stay out here, and I think he's going to wave his way up past his teammate from Verano Motorsport, and that is Gavin Gardner in the Ferrari, as they make the way onto their own next pair of respective laps. Now, as they come on through, it is the case. Well, where is Gaz Williams coming out of the pits? There he is. Well, we do know, of course, Daines has to take a pit stop here, so it's not going to be the case that Daines is going to lap Gaz Williams and roll off into the distance 1 lap ahead of the rest of the field. I can promise you that. But right now, Daines is looking very strong, and I think he's got it all said and done on the pit stop, assuming everything works out in the pit lane. But meanwhile, into the pits as well comes Morten Oosthuus from P2 in the GT3 AM class. And he, oh goodness me, he's overshot his pit box there, and that is going to cost him dearly. That is at least 2 seconds lost in the end, I believe, and that will mean that Matthew Addy right now, well, Addy's got to be aware of that if it's not, and he's got a spotter looking out for him. It will be the case. They'll be saying, you've got to push now, Addy, you've got to push, because of the fact that as he makes his way around, this could be an opportunity for him to close up into that P2 position. He has been showing the pace. It has been building versus what was Oosthuus over the last couple of laps, and in fact that last lap in particular, Matthew Addy took a sizable chunk out of Oosthuus. We'll wait and see. Nigel Stock as well putting his best of the race so far in terms of lap time of 44.875. So our GT3 AM drivers are all coming alive towards the end of this one, and well, we'll have to wait to see how it plays out on that second stop. But right now, I suspect, by comparison, it will be the case that Matthew Addy, well, he set one. In fact, Matthew Addy on that last lap set the best lap of the GT3 AM class, and that was a 43.67. So he is pushing. And where has Oosthuus come out when he leaves the pit lane? He makes his way out of his pit box. He's coming on down here now on our circuit radar. He is going to come out onto a relatively clear track. He's got a couple of the LMP2s coming through. That is Dasunik versus Delmont. That's making its way through the opening corner there. So I think he's going to be okay. Speaking of Dasunik versus Delmont, we can see them making their way through those opening corners. But as they roll on through, I think Oosthuus has given himself more than enough space to come out. He's just come out ahead of Gavin Gardner. So it will be the case that the Dane has timed this one right. He's given himself clear track. Now he can push hard and try to make sure he stays ahead of Matthew Addy, and also closes up a bit of the gap to Matt Emmons. Now into the pits has come Matt Emmons. He's made the pit stop there. He hasn't missed his pit box of what we're hearing. Meanwhile, Matthew Addy has stayed out, so he is going to lead a lap of this race as they make the way on through. With just under 40 minutes, that's 40 minutes to go. And as they make the way on around right now, we're also seeing that Chris Daines is into the pit lane for his scheduled stop. And I think it will be the case that for Daines, it will be a business as usual when they work on the car. But meanwhile, in that GT3 Pro class lead, we have not forgotten about it. It is still Matt Caruana versus Callum Regarton. You're looking at the pair of them as they make the way onto what for them is now lap number 47. And as they go onto that lap, it is the case Caruana continues to lead by 4.5 seconds versus Callum Regarton. These two, of course, running near identical pace. Jean-Louis Deschamps down in P3 of the class, not able to match them for pace at this time. In fact, Jean-Louis Deschamps losing approximately 3.5 to 4 tenths of a second a lap compared to them. I think Deschamps feeling quite comfortable in that P3 position. But speaking of pit stops and then working out, well, here is Matt Emmons leaving the pit lane. Now, where is his closest rival? That is Oosthuus, who's in P6, the GT3 AM class. Well, Emmons, as he makes his way, he doesn't need to do anything fancy here. Just get the car at the pit lane nice and gently. He has gotten more than enough of a gap, or has he, as he makes his way back up to speed here. Where is Oosthuus, I hear you ask? Well, he's just making his way right now into turn 1. That shows you the gap that Emmons has opened up. It is the case that Hiller and Eastport driver has not been able to close up to Emmons as much as he like. He has dropped that gap down by at least 2 seconds since they pitted, but it is the case after the second round of pit stops. Well, Ustus has not been able to close up to Emmons, and into the pits now comes Matthew Addy as we hear the fastest lap of the race in the LMP PRO class is now 33.5 as set by Alistair Kirk. He's going for that extra pair of points, but meanwhile now with Addy into the pit lane here, he's in his pit box, and now we'll have to wait and see how Emmons and Addy come out and Oosterhuis as well. As we see Jordan Pope there, who had a moment earlier on, comes out of the pits and goes racing once again. As we do look to Cameron Garton and Matt Caruana, the battle for the lead of the GT3 Pro class as they make the way on around here. No change between them. Did we see either one of them peel into the pits here? No, they both decide to stay out. Stuart P. Taylor goes on to lead the GT3 AM class for at least a lap. He does have another stop scheduled, I should point out. But right now we will find out what exactly is going to happen with regards to where Taylor comes out and where does Matthew Addy come out. That's the bigger question. And meanwhile, Robert Dasunik and Adam Delmont battling. Well, we thought they were battling position. It looks in fact that gap has opened up again. I think that's a little bit of a glitch on our timing screens there. Apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. As we see here, Robert Dasunik is pulling away from Adam Delmont. He's got that gap up now to what is 1.2 seconds. But he's got a lot of traffic as Dasunik. Well, when I say a lot, it's one car, but it's the worst place to catch Ben Payne, who's P3 in the GT3 AM class, and it's through turn 1 into 2. And that is going to hurt Dasunik massively coming into turn 3, because now he will have lost that advantage and it's going to almost be slipstream zone for what is Adam Delmont if he can get close enough coming out to turns 5 into 6. As they roll through, we hear that Matthew Addy is leaving the pit lane. He's coming on out, and that is what is more to do. Who's coming on through here. Now it's going to be close, but I think Usus has done enough, or has he? Well, Addy's still on the limiter, and he's now coming up to speed. Usus in the end has managed to hold off Matthew Addy, and well, it looks as though Addy's pace is definitely being demonstrated, because now, as he makes his way through turn 3, that gap between the two of them before the second round of pit stops, that gap was about 6 seconds. Now that gap has come down to what is only 2 seconds, and that is all because of the fact Ustu's going ahead of his pit box, and as a result having that slight delay to being serviced. And also Addy has been demonstrating absolutely monstrous pace on that second stint. Now if he can carry this through to the third stint, I think that when Payne, Stock and Taylor pit, assuming we don't have anything exceptional happen with regards to their 3 pit stops, they somehow end up in that battle for the podium, it will be the case that Matthew Addy will be hunting for P2 versus Oosterhuis with less than 40 minutes to go. In fact, less than, well, it's the case 35 minutes very shortly as they make the way on through here at the Daytona International Speedway road course circuit. But right now, still plenty to play for all of our drivers as they head on around. And the question, of course, is with Jean-Louis Deschamps into the pit lane here from what was P3 in the GT3 Pro class. He peels on in. Well, Gavin Gardner, who is quite a way back, to be fair, he's looking for P4 at most, we reckon. We'll have to wait and find out whether he does find the jump a bit later on in this race, or whether it's the case it doesn't work out. As he comes and charges on through, it is the case that we can see as he rolls into bits. In fact, Gavin Gardner coming on in. And as he does make his way in, it does look as though here it's going to be a standard stop, and Jean-Louis Deschamps still being serviced, and Eduardo Francachin peeling on in to the pit lane here, and well, he'll be going for his scheduled stop, and he's coming in from P5 in the class. But as he makes his way into the pits, Cameron Garton here, well, he has fallen a little bit back off of Matt Caruana as Carmelo Martello was come on through to take P3 in the GT3 Pro class for the time being. But Carton, Reed Garton, I should say, now the best part of what is their 7/10, where he's in fact closed up into the bus stop chicane, and I think both drivers are having to balance the damage on their cars respectively and be very, very careful with regards to how sensitive the car is, particularly Matt Caruana on that rear end, where the damage to the rear aero is going to hurt the balance of the car through corners, particularly through that bus stop chicane, and it will make the car very tricky indeed to drive. But he's looking very comfortable right now as they make the way on to another lap very shortly. And I can tell you, whilst they're making the way onto another lap, it is the case that Adam Delmont here trying to close up to the back of Robert Dasunik, because we hear that Cameron Garton has now set the fastest lap of the GT3 Pro class race at 43.242, and well, it's the case that Reed Garton continuing to push on as they make their way on around the circuit. Now, as Adam Delmont here tries to close up to the back of Robert Dasunik here in that battle for P4 in the LMP Pro class, and we see that both drivers are trying to navigate the traffic as well. That is Stuart Taylor, who's leading the GT3 AM class at this time. Delmont's got to think about when does he do it, and we see Stuart Taylor pulling onto the race line, in fact making Delmont take a very tight line into 4, and Stuart Taylor backs out under braking into 5 just about, but he only gives Delmont literally the bare minimum room. I think Delmont there might have had his heart jump out of his chest a little bit. Not to say Taylor's done anything wrong, but in the end, Delmont has had to really find his way on through, and that's hurt him a bit, to be fair, in the infield section in terms of closing up to Dasunik, and Dasunik has found his way on the high line now past the lead traffic of the GT3 Pro class. So the Dutchman here having quite a comfortable time of making his way through the latest GT3 traffic, and from this point onwards he's got quite a gap before he then comes up against more traffic. But I can tell you one thing about Robert Dasunik, he is closing up to the top two in what is the LMP2 Pro class in terms of Daines and also Gaz Williams. Daines, of course, a long way up the road, although I say that, Williams is gradually closing up to Daines. The gap is 10.5 seconds. And with that in mind, I wonder whether Dasunik and Skinner are going to be battling to be on the podium and the better part of what is second place, at least on the podium, when this one is all said and done. We have still got just over half an hour of racing to go, but the story is, and I can tell you this without a doubt, that right now the fastest man on circuit in the LMP2 Pro class is Gaz Williams. The second fastest man out on circuit is Robert Dasunik in P4, and right now they are both chasing down their respective opponents who are ahead of them at a very rapid rate of knots. Now, whether it is the case that Chris Daines, for example, is just simply balancing and nursing the car a little bit to make sure he's got more than enough fuel to get to the end, and then he'll push towards the end to go for fastest lap. That could be something he wants to do to try and get that perfect score, but it is one of those cases right now where the tables do seem to be turning once again. And speaking of tables turning, I can tell you that Callum Regarton has actually passed Matt Caruana only moments ago. Now, how did this happen? Let's take a look. Well, this is in the run down towards turn 1, and, well, Callum Regarton being made to go high here as they went across the timing line. Now, Caruana staying low, but he's not defending. In fact, you can see how much he's lifted out there before the braking zone. So in the end, Regarton deciding he wants to go for it. He wants to take the lead. Now, will this be a smart move? Or has Caruana decided, you know what, I'm going to tuck in to a bit more fuel saving and then get the jump when they come into the pits? They can't be too far away from that second stop, to be fair, as they both make their way in. I think Caruana, they're trying to look for that potential move into the bus stop chicane, but way too far back to actually go for it. I think that's a bit of a dummy move there, or a bit of a signal, trying to get into the head of Regarton. But as they come out, will we see one of them peel on in now? Because it is the case that we are now 90 minutes into the race when they come across the start-finish line this time around, and that could be the signal for one of them to peel into the pits. Or will we see them both go a little bit longer? They can do so, to be fair. We will wait and find out with bated breath as they come up towards the pit entry. They both go past it, and Matt Caruana closing up in the tow there versus the bush of Regarton. You can see Regarton immediately going high, giving Caruana space on the inside, but Caruana saying, no, I don't want it. You can have it, thank you very much. And that is now the signal. Caruana, I think, is happy. He's the P2 man in this situation as he sets a personal best there of a 43.2. But Regarton, a 43.18. Regarton is definitely trying to get the move on. As they roll them through the corners, we do look to what is the battle for the lead of the GT3 AM class. Well, Nigel Stock is into the pit, so that will mean that Matt Evans here, as he makes his way down towards the timeline, he will retake the lead of the GT3 AM class. We're hearing that Darren Dotley's leaving the pit lane. He's a lap down in P7 on the leaders in the class, and as they make that through, Matt Evans retakes the lead of class as we predicted. Nigel Stock still being serviced. Where is Matthew Addy, however? Well, hold up a second. Matthew Addy is ahead of Morten Ustus, and what has happened to Ustus? That is the question we've got to ask, because it would seem that right now Matthew Addy has jumped ahead of Ustus, and, well, we can't quite tell you when it's happened on circuit. I think there's been an off track. Let's find out very shortly for you, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, we can find out now. Well, this was only moments ago for the Hilliard Esport driver, and he lost the rear end there into the bus stop chicane. Very well called, to be fair. Now, that is a very good catch, and that is how Matthew Addy got past. So the Hilliard Esport driver is there in the BMW M4, just losing at the bus stop, and that very tricky chicane catching a lot of drivers out tonight. And, well, now Matthew Addy into P2. He's got a 17.6 second gap to close up to Matt Evans, his teammate. And, well, the last time the two of them were running P1, P2 was at Watkins Glen in the sprint. And I think those of you who do have your history books out will remember what happened in the season opener at Watkins Glen when they came together at a corner. It was the case. They both ended up losing out on that potential win and that 1-2 finish for NXTGEN Racing for Sam Case's UK. We'll have to wait and see if they close up. They have got 28.5 minutes to go plus the final lap. We will see, but I do think it's going to be the case that right now they'll be looking to settle into a rhythm, albeit I think Matthew Addy will be trying to push as much as he possibly can. He is a tiny bit faster than Edmonds, but we'll wait and see how it balances out over the course of the race distance. But what I can also tell you is that with that mistake made by Ustus, right now Nigel Stock is out in P3 ahead of the Dane. It is the case the Briton has made his way ahead. Now can he hold on? Oh, goodness me, Ustus, I say that, and into the tyre barrier there, getting it wrong at the bus stop chicane, only a few laps after his previous off. And Ustus there, I think that is going to be a lot of damage to the car. He brings it back up to speed. Credit to him as Stuart Taylor comes through to take P4. And, well, where's Ben Payne on circuit? Well, Payne, by comparison, in P6 is only just making his way on around right now. Payne's actually quite a way back. He's all the way making his way onto turn 7. So Ustus here will be coming into the pits. Does he have a fast repair available? If so, he should retain P5, but it is not looking comfortable anymore in that BMW M4. And let's take a look at what happened. Riding on board here, and see as he comes into the corner, he carries a lot of speed, and the rear's already kicked out before he's even made the start of the corner and into the tyre barrier. And for Ustus, my goodness, well, that car, I think it's the case, he's just pushed it as hard as he can, and now the car is starting to feel very uncomfortable there and unsettled as we return to live pictures. He's in the pits, he's had that fast repair. Where is Ben Payne in all this? Well, Payne's making his way out from the banking right now of turn number 12. He's got quite a way to go, Ustus, before he leaves the pit lane. I think he's leaving it now. In fact, he is. He's coming through the corner now. I think it's the case the Dane is more than safe to hold on to that P5 for the time being with the time remaining. And meanwhile, I can tell you that both Callum Garton and Matt Caruana have taken their pit stops. And, well, since taking their second stops, this happened whilst we were focusing on the GT3 AM class. Callum Garton has come back out ahead of Matt Caruana, and it is the case that Garton has come out very close to the back of his teammate, Tom Edmonds, and Tom Edmonds has come out ahead of the pair of them. So Edmonds right now, well, my goodness, now this is a turn in the tail. It is the case that Tom Edmonds, but to be fair, and my apologies, we should point out that Tom Edmonds had to come into the pits with the damage that he picked up at this corner when he made the contact with Antonio Giovinazzi after Giovinazzi lost it here. It is the case that Tom Edmonds right now is running a stop down on his teammate and also Matt Caruana, and what that means is, I think what Edmonds has decided to, I think what the team has said is, right, Edmonds is to help Garton as much as possible, and that is to give him the tow for a couple of laps before Edmonds has to eventually peel on in. That is the only thing I can predict. The only other thing would be that Edmonds has found some way by pitting it around the hour and 5 minute mark of essentially taking that second stop early, and now he's got to try and save as much fuel to go to the end of the race and manage the car to the end, which if so, that'd be colossal. We see the brake disc there lighting up on both of the Altitude Esports rear brakes there on both of the Porsche 911s. Fantastic shot there for anyone who's a photographer down the track side, but it is the case that Callum Garton right now, well, tucked in behind his teammate, and Matt Caruana, you can see him there, he's not too far behind his Caruana, he is pushing on as well. It is the case, it will be very, very nip and tuck between these guys for the remainder of the race as they come on through. Now, with all this in mind, I'm hearing that Matthew Addy has recently been passed by Nigel Stock. Now, how has that happened, I hear you ask? Well, let's take a look back and find out. Making their way down the start-finish straight here, and on the inside, and Nigel Stock getting a really good run, and Matthew Addy on that previous lap actually dropping 1.5 seconds. I think Addy made a mistake. We haven't heard of an off-track for Addy, but it is the case that Nigel Stock really coming alive, and well, could Nigel Stock potentially bring home a second place today? I think Evans has got more than enough gap to hold on as Callum Garton here makes the switch with his teammate Tom Edmonds to take the lead as they go into the bus stop chicane. I think this was scheduled, and now as they make their way through the tricky chicane, it will be the case that Callum Garton will try to break off into the distance here with 24 minutes plus the final lap remaining. Can he do it? That's the question. Or will Edmonds have to worry about the fact that if he can't hold Matt Caruana at bay for long enough, then it will be the case that Caruana's right back there at the end. And of course, remember, they've repaired their cars, they've taken that fast repair, and now they are running pristine cars once again, minus the tyres. Of course, the tyre wear that they're picking up on the fuel tanks, it is the case they'll be battling until the very end of this race. But Matt Caruana already showing that pace, a 1:43.0, the fastest lap of any GT3, of course, over the GT3 Pro class as well. And Matt Caruana pushing on here. He's closing up. He wants to get as close as possible to Tom Edmonds before Callum Garton is able to try and pull the disappearing act. And as they make their way through the infield right now, you'd have to imagine that Caruana has got his sights very firmly set on a pair of Altitude Esports Porsche 911s in front as he rolls on through. Meanwhile, it is the case that Adam Delmont here, well, he has fallen a bit further back of Robert Dasunik. And to give you a status update on what's happening in the LMP2 Pro class, I can tell you, remember last time when we cut to the LMP2 drivers, particularly our race leader, the Caruana Mosport driver Chris Daines was ahead of Gaz Williams by 11 seconds. That gap has now been slashed down to 6 seconds, and on that last lap, it was the case that Williams was 3/10 of a second faster. Gaz Williams is pushing as we look at the second place man from NXTGEN Racing right now, and he is pushing on. That last lap from Daines at 35.4, and as Williams crosses the line this time, what's the lap going to be? It's a 34.9. I think Williams here will be very close to the back of Daines come the final couple of laps. I think he's got the pace. However, Dan Skinner in P3 and also Robert Dasunik in P4 are lapping even faster. In fact, they both just took a whole second out of Gaz Williams and a whole 1.5 seconds out of Chris Daines. This is going to go to the wire, I think, in the battle for the podium. Now, of course, the problem is that if Dasunik and Skinner come together too soon, alternatively, when they get up behind Gaz Williams, Williams is not going to want to let them go. He will want to hold on to that position, but that will be the challenge, of course, in terms of can they ignore one another briefly to chase after Chris Daines and reel him in, or will it be the case that Daines finds a way to break off into the distance? As we can see here, Caruana tucked up behind Tom Edmonds now. He's just set the fastest lap race of 42.6. It's the best part of 3/10 faster. He goes up the inside there of Edmonds and gets the move done. And Edmonds there not really offering much of a defense. I don't think he's got anything to offer in terms of a defense as William Folt into the pits for his second scheduled stop. And right now, Matt Caruana, it has to be said, is absolutely flying in terms of hunting after Callum Regarton. I think now all he's got to do is find the time to attack Callum Regarton and then try and make the break. Now is the time to look for him. But of course, we'll have to wait and see, with just over 20 minutes to go here, how the story is going to play out as they make the way through the left-hander of turn number 6 and head up into the banking of 7. But it is all coming together across the respective classes, and well, we could have quite a finale here at Daytona when we do get to those final 10 minutes. As Matt Caruana continues to chase down Callum Regarton, of course, he will be thinking about doing a little bit of fuel saving here where he can afford to, for the simple reason the more fuel he has come the end of the race, he will be able to push the car a little bit higher, use the higher RPM bands before shifting up a gear, and of course that will mean that he gets a little bit more acceleration in the car typically. As he makes his way up into turn number 7 right now, it is the case that Caruana, well, he has not benefited too much from having Ed Lack come charging on through, but Lack has now passed Callum Regarton as well. The LMP2 driver making his way past the GT3 traffic in his mind. But as they come down towards the start-finish line here, you can see Tom Edmonds closing up. But I think Edmonds, I wonder whether Edmonds is trying to go to the end after that very early stop forcing him while the contact with Giovinazzi. And if so, to be fair, Edmonds would make this work an absolute trick, because right now, after losing all that time and having to come into the pits with a wounded car, take the fast repair and go on, it would be the case if he'd be looking to finish P3 as the minimum. We'll wait to see. So, of course, if he does pit, then Jean-Louis Deschamps is 31.5 seconds behind, who may be taking that final place on the podium when all is said and done. But as they come roaring on around here through the infield, we do look to Matthew Hodges, meanwhile, who has come out behind William Foyle when the pit stops have occurred. William Foyle, of course, the latest of the stoppers in terms of the GT3 Pros, and as they make their way through the bus stop chicane, we ride on board Matthew Hodges here, who looks to try and gain that position of the McLaren driver. Now as they make their way up into the bank in the turn number 12, this is where the Ferrari will excel a little bit more in terms of the fact, because it's got the toe, it can gain a bit more acceleration in 5th and 6th gear. As you can see, they're shifting up into 6th gear. Matthew Hodges and the 6 on Project Black driver trying to hunt down that P8 position. And now as they make their way onto that start-finish line, this is where that 6th gear is activated as they come through. And as they make their way towards turn 1, will Hodges look to the inside, he's thinking about it. He can't quite get close enough to go for it. He has to wait for another opportunity as they both roll on through at turn 1 and head up towards turn 3. Now as they roll through into turn 3 at this point, of course, Hodges has got to think about where he goes for it. Given the fact the McLaren is slightly stronger in the infield section from what we've seen by comparison with the Ferrari, though Hodges not really losing any time there on the exit of 3, although he did run a little bit wide and used a bit more exit curve than perhaps he wanted to, actually mounting the curve there. But as they come down into 5, you can see they're full going defensive initially and then thinking about pulling back across. And I think worried a bit about the fact that Ferrari's looking very strong, as Hodges they're getting a little bit of snap oversteer on exit first gear, and as they make their way up into turn 6, but they have got Darren Doherty ahead of them, the driver who's P7 in the GT3 AM class, and I wonder if they'll be able to manipulate having Darren Doherty ahead of them order to be able to gain a bit of a toe, and whether it's the case particularly for Foyle, whether he can have dominance between him and Hodges for a brief period of time. We'll have to wait and see as they make the way on through. But as we look from them to what is Matthew Addy in the P3 position in the GT3 AM class, we can see here he's tucked in behind Nigel Stock. Now I can tell you that out of the top three, it is the case that Matthew Addy is the fastest of the top three by a sizable margin in the GT3 AM class. Meanwhile, it is also the case that Stuart Taylor is going quite quickly himself, albeit that last lap nowhere near as quick. He has been going quickly previously, but right now Matthew Addy looking very comfortable and very strong here behind what is Nigel Stock. But I think if anything, he'll be going for P2 at most, because Matt Emmons is so far up the order in terms of up the road by comparison. But meanwhile, we talked about him moments ago, and as they make their way in towards turn number 1 very shortly, it's going to be Foyle on the inside. Hodges going around the outside, and as they come on through and the camera pans round, will Hodges have got this done? He's going to have to be very bold. He's going to have to commit as they run up towards 3. They do have behind them Jamie Dory, who sipes as well. The inside is going to be 3 wide into turn 3. Dory goes for it. Hodges in the middle there does not get reverse Moses. Instead, he holds the position, and well, I think Hodges there now has to worry about the offence from William Foyle as they make the way down into turn number 5 here, and Foyle will be trying to come back very strongly in short order, but Hodges, I think, has got it done. We'll have to wait and find out come the end of this lap. Of course, they've got the long slipstream section of the run out of 6 up towards the bus stop chicane. As they come on through, you can see Alistair Kirk there with a flash of the lights to say, look, I'm coming on through, guys, might give me the space. And Will Hodges, I think, will be grateful for this as he gets a flash of lights there from Alistair Kirk, and the fact he can tuck in behind the LMP2, gain a little bit of a distance over a brief while. And as we run on board the gearbox, you can see how much that's cost William Foyle in terms of having to let Alistair Kirk through up into turn number 6, and the fact that Hodges was given the breather as they make the way down into the bus stop chicane braking zone. Now, as they roll on in, we do a look to a replay of that move and how it all played out, and how Matthew Hodges gained P8 in the GT3 Pro class. Well, here it was all about the run down towards the start-finish line and the slipstream battle, and it is the case that Hodges timed it very nicely in terms of when he pulled out, got the overspeed, but you can see here Foyle does have that inside line, and he committed to the defence here, but Hodges had to try and find a way to outbrake Foyle. He did so, and in the process actually got Foyle to hold a very tight line, but in the acceleration stakes coming out the corner, you can see how in the end Foyle actually had a really good run, but this is where Jamie Dory comes in, and with them going 3 wide under the braking zone, you can see Hodges goes to turn in, he can't. William Foyle goes to turn in, he can't. And whether Foyle wanted to cut back or just to simply run it side by side out of turn 3 out towards turn 5, it was the case that Foyle in the end just simply had to wait until Hodges cleared the corner, and that's all through Jamie Dory coming down. And as a result, I think Hodges will be grateful for the fact he might have been a little bit worried about Dory coming through at short notice at first, but I think he'll be grateful for the fact that he did have Dory come through there, and that gave him a little bit of supporting breathing room as they made their way through the turn 3 horseshoe hairpin. But meanwhile, as they make their way on around, we can see the battle for the GT3 Pro lead now is starting to raise itself to the next level, with Caruana going on the offensive here versus Callum Garton showing the first signs. And as they make their way down into the turn 3 hairpin, it is the case that you can see how Tom Edmonds tucked in behind. As what we like to call, as we ride on board here with Tom Edmonds in the Porsche 911, the popcorn seat view, because he's right there watching the battle in front of him. Now, Edmonds, of course, he's managing a car that's going on a 55-minute stint. As you can see, Caruana there looking for every which way, taking a bit of grass with him through turn 4. Caruana are putting so much pressure on at this point in the race. He's trying to intimidate Callum Garton into a mistake. You can see literally moving onto that racing line at the last moment to go left, right and centre, trying to keep Callum Garton to his toes. And Tom Edmonds at this point can only watch and tuck in that slipstream because of the fact he's on such a long stint and managing the car. And as they make the way on through here and head down towards the bus stop chicane, again you can see Callum Garton pulling out a little bit to the side. What's he thinking? Sorry, Matt Caruana should say, what is he thinking? It is the case. I think he's trying to intimidate and move, and as they make the way into the bus stop this time, he's almost there, Caruana, but he's not quite. Instead, as they roll them through, we run forward the gearbox here of the leader in the Altitude Esports machine, that is Callum Garton, as they make the way now up towards turn number 12 and onto the bank and they go. Now, of course, the Porsche here will not have the benefit of the toe of the car in front of it. He will have that challenge of just holding on, and as they make the way on through, it is the case. In fact, he's getting a bit of a distant toe here as Callum Garton over the back of Matthew Addy. He's just a bit further up the road, about a second up the road from the pair of them. You can see Callum Garton here having to hold that low line versus Matt Caruana, who goes to the outside line once again. He goes high. They come behind the battle for P2 in the GT3 AM class. Now, this is going to be very painful for Callum Garton first and foremost, because he's got to find a way to navigate his way past Nigel Stock and Matthew Addy, who are battling for position. Don't forget, this is the battle for second spot on the GT3 AM class podium. They both want this just as much as the guys behind want the win. It's critical for their championship campaigns. Now, how will this play out? That is the question that we'll all be asking. And, well, I think Callum Garton is trying to hold on for the run down towards the bus stop. I think he'll want that toe, and he'll want Matthew Addy to show awareness of the fact that he's coming on through. But this runs a bit of an analogue, would you not agree, ladies and gentlemen, to what we saw in the battles between the GT3 Pro lead and the LMP2 Pro lead at Watkins Glen in the sprint, in the fact that we do have now two classes coming up behind one another for two very valid battles. But as they come through on the bank in the turn 7, it is the case you can see there. Chris Daines coming through on the high line in the LMP2 machine, flashing his lights incessantly to say, don't mind me, I'm just coming on through on the outside, do not go high. And as a result, as he clears them, they now go back to racing, and you see Matt Caruana once again looking for that potential move to the bus stop. He's too far back. He's just constantly trying to get in the rear view mirror. Callum Garton trying to make him make a mistake, but Garton is not making any errors here. And in fact, the only one of the two of them who's made a mistake so far is Matt Caruana, who's made a tiny error. But again, it's so small, the error, and the difference between the two of them is negligible as they make the line through. You can see that on the high line. That's Gaz Williams coming on through, chasing after Chris Daines for the lead of the LMP2 Pro class. As into the bits comes Tom Edmonds. He couldn't make it to the end, so he's taking it as long as he can go. So now Caruana versus Callum Garton. Garton on his own. As we can see, it's the case. They go 2 by 2 here. It's Matthew Addy tries to go all the way around the outside. He gets it done. What about Matt Caruana? Addy goes deep. He locks up and goes very deep in the end. And meanwhile, as they make their way through now, Garton is in a side-by-side dash, but he's boxed in behind Nigel Stock, and Matt Caruana comes through on the inside, and as a result Caruana takes the lead, but he can't put Nigel Stock between him and Callum Garton. So now it is the case, the battle continues, and my goodness, will the pro leaders change, but the P2 position in the GT3 AM class has not changed as they carry on. For that brief moment, we thought Matthew Addy may have got it done round the outside, then a very brave move on Nigel Stock, but he could not quite put it together when all was said and done. And let's just take a look back at that moment in particular. And see here, Matthew Addy went all in here. And to be fair, he wanted to try and get it done. I think he was worried about the battle coming up behind him. He made his way in, carried a bit too much speed, and the car just gives way at that critical juncture when he went into the apex there. Just a bit of understeer. The car locked up on the front end, and that is what cost him very dearly. As meanwhile, that battle for the lead, well, in the end, Matt Caruana placed himself very well, and Callum Garton getting boxed in at the most unfortunate moment behind Nigel Stock. But they are carrying on racing, I can tell you. And right now, as they make the way on through, well, it is the case that Matt Caruana is not dropping Callum Garton whatsoever. They push on all the same as they make the way on through. Chris Daines now sets the fastest lap of the race in the LMP2 Pro class of a 33.016. That's 1 second faster than Gaz Williams. I think Chris Daines may be feeling a bit more comfortable now with the way the car is. But meanwhile, whilst all this is going on, I can tell you, as Callum Garton tries to go around the outside of Matt Caruana, and there's a roll on through, well, he's going to be very dangerous. He's looking for the cutback, in fact. Caruana says, no, I'm pretty aware of that, thank you very much. I'm simply going to park it on apex, and mate, you have to tuck into the back of me. And Caruana defends here into the horseshoe hairpin as they come on through the right-hander at turn 3. It does look as though Nigel Stock trying to stay with these guys to break away from Matthew Addy, but Addy closing on up as well as they roll through. But what I can also report, once all this has been going on, Eduardo Franceschin has moved up to P4 in the GT3 Pro class, and I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, it's the case that Jean-Louis Deschamps has had a slightly off lap, and also Eduardo Franceschin has closed up very rapidly over the last 4 to 5 laps. So it is the case that the DRS Sport driver is not going to be on the podium at this rate, as far as we understand, but he is putting in a very solid performance all the same, as Tom Edmonds after his pit stop is 30 seconds off of the battle for the lead, but he is 4 seconds ahead of Eduardo Franceschin, who we see here in the rear of the picture, who is starting to break away from Jean-Louis Deschamps very gradually as they roll him through. With 9 minutes to go here at Daytona, and well, the time is ticking down in the LMP2 class. I can tell you that that battle we potentially anticipated for the podium spots has not really materialised, unfortunately. Chris Daines is pressing on here, and as he comes across the timeline this time around, it is going to be for Chris Daines a 35.2. What about for Gaz Williams? It is going to be there a 34.3. So Williams is still closing up approximately half a second to a second a lap. It could happen still. We'll have to wait and see. But the big battle for the lead right now is in the GT3 Pro class as they make their way across that timeline. And this time, Cameron Garton's got a much bigger overspeed as they head on to another lap. They go on to lap number 64 for them. And now Cameron Garton's going to try and send it all the way around the outside, or is he going to try and go for another cutback? He tries the cutback again. What he's trying to do here, if you're wondering why, ladies and gentlemen, he's doing the same thing twice and expect a different result. He's trying to get Caruana to go deep into one and therefore lose that exit speed, lose the front end so he can't get the power down. And it's not quite worked out, but Caruana goes a little bit deep into 3, and that could be what Garton needs to look at the move. Not quite. It is the case as they make the way up into 4. It's going to be one of the situations where Caruana has the lead just about still as Adam Delmont into the pits from what was P4 and the LMP2 Pro class. Well, that's a little bit of a shock to the system. In fact, that's Alistair Kirk. My apologies, into the pits. It's not Adam Delmont. It is the case that Adam Tillman has been passed on circuit, as I understand, but Matt Caruana right now throwing everything down. In fact, Adam Tillman has been into the pits. My apologies, I can confirm he has been into the pits, and Alistair Kirk has also been into the pits as well. So we were right the first time around as we continue to watch the battle for the lead of the GT3 Pros here, and we'll further down the order. I can tell you that in the battle for P4, Jean-Louis Deschamps has closed up to the back of Eduardo Francochin as they make their way down into turn number 5, and behind them is Stefan Albanese, who's a lap down here, but I think the DRS eSport driver, if he could, he would find a way to help out his teammate. I think those blue flags might be stopping him somewhat in terms of if he was to be able to get ahead of Deschamps. Deschamps, I don't think will be too happy about that either. But as they make the way up onto the bank in the 7, we'll have to wait and see how it plays out between the pair of them. As meanwhile, in the battle for what is P8 in the GT3 Pro class, we have Matthew Hodges still holding off what is William Foyle there as they make their way down into turn number 5. And Hodges, well, he was a little bit clear, and William Foyle is now staying with him. As meanwhile, again in the battle for the lead of the class of the GT3 Pros, we can see Cameron Garton this time trying to go all the way around. He can't quite find it, but he is finding ways to gain that upper hand on Caruana. But behind them, Nigel Stock having to hold off Matthew Addy here with less than 7 minutes to go. In fact, it's going to be 6 minutes plus the final lap very shortly. And as they make their way up towards turn 5 in the infield section, I mean, Nigel Stock, to be fair, if he's able to hold on to this will be a huge performance from Nigel Stock, a driver who at the start of this season did not seem to be going too far up the order, but since the Canadian Tire Motorsport part where he picked up that win in the sprint, he made that critical mistake in the feature which cost him very dearly and saw him retire. But it does seem as though Nigel Stock is just finding form, and well, this form we love to see from the Crest Autosport of Apex Tracks driver, because right now he is throwing a huge spanner into the works of the form of the favourites in the GT3 AM class, albeit Matt Emmons the leader 20.5 seconds up the road, but Matthew Addy right now would not have expected to have this situation with Nigel Stock as they make their way into the closing minutes of this race. As they come roaring on down here and head into what is, head down into the bus stop chicane, and no change between the two of them as they roll through. I can tell you further around on circuit that Eduardo Francochin is still holding off what is Jean-Louis Deschamps there for P4 in the GT3 Pro class, but he is feeling that pressure, albeit we can see that Alistair Kirk siphoning his way on through in the LMP2 machine for TGC Racing. And as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane, not long to go, I think if Jean-Louis Deschamps is going to go for it, he needs to find a way to get close up in the infield and try and break the toe by the time they get up onto the banking, or is he going to save it all to the drag race to the finish line? We will have to wait and see as they all continue their way on around the circuit. As they do, Scott McLean has had a bit of an off from what we're hearing. Is the case the Crest Autosport Ferrari driver's got it a bit wrong. That's at turn number 3, unless I'm very much mistaken. What has happened here to the GT3 AM driver? Well, making his way down from turn number 1 through 2 and up into 3. Here's the rear going to come round under braking as he makes way into the corner, goes a bit deep, and the rear snaps around on him as he tries to go through the corner there, and well, getting it a bit unsettled, but he'll be going racing again very shortly. But as they make the way on through then, with less than 5 minutes to go now, it is the case. We look from what is towards the rear of the GT3 AM class to towards the front of it. And, well, he will be looking at that timer. And we're not going to look at him too long, because I know many of you will be screaming right now, take the camera off of him, don't curse him. But Emmons does look quite comfortable with only 4 minutes that final lap to go, as Chris Daines takes the fastest lap in the LMP2 Pro class there, a 32.4, as Gaz Williams is into the pits here for a scheduled stop. Now, where is Robert de Soenik is the question. Well, Robert de Soenik is making his way through the bus stop, I think. Well, Gaz Williams is leaving the pit lane, so he's going for fastest lap as well. He does not want Chris Daines to have a perfect night. He can gamble on it, so he's not going to catch Chris Daines by the end. But meanwhile, Adam Delmont's had a major moment as well, and that's Delmont into the wall then. The whole front of the car's gone. What's happened to Adam Delmont? Well, this was only moments ago. He went into the bus stop chicane here, offline slightly due to a GT3 is passing. As he exited, the rear of the car just came loose and smack bang into the wall and took the front end off. And that is Adam Delmont's race. What was looking to be a guaranteed P4 is now down to P8. Meanwhile, we do look to the battle for the lead of the GT3 Pros as we see Mark Fletcher racing here in the YouTube chat, cheering on what is, of course, Cannery Garton as they make the way on around. I can tell you, by the way, that Tom Edmonds, the other Altitude Esports driver in the class, is battling with Eduardo Franceschin in the battle for the final spot on the podium here. And Edmonds, of course, having to take that third stop due to damage picked up on the car earlier on, the contact with Antonio Giovinazzi in that major incident of the bus stop chicane. And Franceschin is now up into P3 with 2.5 minutes to go. And I think it could be the case here that Altitude Esports are going to be denied a double podium at this point. As we can see, Jean-Louis Deschamps tucked in behind, and it is all kicking off right at the end here. And Carmelo Martello is only 1.7 seconds off the back of this trio. So as they make the way through the infield once again, could it be the case that we suddenly see a rise of drivers into the top 5, and particularly could do Jean-Louis Deschamps or even Franceschin breakaway with that P3 finish in the end? Well, it will be found out within a very short order. We have not got long left to go, I can tell you that. And also a bit further back, Gavin Gardner has got some increasing pressure, and that is with Matthew Hodges chasing after him, who's defending versus William Falls. William Fall goes very deep into the corner there. I think Fall had to open the steering because of how close he was to Hodges. So we have got a number of battles erupting right at the last possible moment. Well, it is the case that whilst all this is going on, I can tell you that Cannery Garton has had a brief off versus Matt Caruana. He is trying to chase Matt Caruana here, and I believe that both of them are now going on to what for them will be their penultimate lap, unless I'm mistaken. But Cannery Garton right now trying to find a way to get back in the tow of where's Matt Caruana after that brief off. In terms of the off, well, if you're wondering what happened exactly, here it was. He came out of turn number 5 here in what was the dirty air, the Crystal Autosport Ferrari, and he snaps there to take evasive action, in fact, and out the inside he went at Cannery Garton, trying to waste no time here. He is literally pushing it every which way to try and hunt down the race leader, but I think he's running out of time. A minute to go. One more lap after this as our race leader overall, that is Chris Daines, is coming across the timeline very shortly to go on to that final lap. But meanwhile, where it was the case, he's been battling with Nigel Stock for some time. Matthew Addy is back up into P2 in the GT3 class. How did it happen, I hear you ask? Let's take a look back. Whereas in the run here all the way down to what was turn number 1, and as they made their way across that timeline, well, Matthew Addy had to go the long way around here. Nigel Stock, you can see the beastly nature of that Mercedes in the straight line, but Matthew Addy tried it before, and this time he got it done. Nigel Stock did not have enough leverage on the brakes, and Matthew Addy finally getting into that P2 position after all that effort expended. And I'm hearing that Matthew Hodges has also made his way up. Oh, goodness me, well, it's the case of 3 wide here. As they come down in towards turn 1, they're now 2 wide. Gavin Gardner up high. William Fall trying to look in the middle, and Matthew Hodges on the low defending. And William Fall looks at the inside versus Gavin Gardner here. This is the battle for P7 in the GT3 Pro class. And well, with that in mind, as we reach the 2-hour mark, so the leader now will be bringing out the checkered flag next time. It is the case that Gavin Gardner defends versus William Foyle, but it is all going down to the wire here in the battle for P7 as well. There's action happening left, right and centre, and Gardner's having to defend. He has not got the pace to go hunting after Hodges, and now Foyle's got to try and look for the move, and Foyle's going to look up the inside. He goes all the way, and I think he's going to get the move done here, but we do need to very shortly cut away from this to our leader in what is the LMP2 Pro class, because he's come from the back of the field, and well, he's made it look simple, but the case it has been a very difficult one. But regardless, as he heads to the finish line, it will be another win to add to his tally. It is Chris Daines from Verano Motorsport who takes the win in the LMP2 Pro class here at the end of the 2-hour endurance at Daytona. A brilliant drive from the Verano Motorsport driver, and in the end it will be P2 to Gaz Williams when all is said and done. But meanwhile, as he comes to the end, we're just waiting to see where the rest of our drivers are. As we're hearing that Tom Edmonds has come to the end in what is the GT3 Pro race, so it is the case As we're trying to see who else is coming across the line shortly. Well, here is Gareth Williams coming to the end. He will be in P2 in the LMP2 Pro class. In a solid drive from Gaz Williams, but just not able to take that fight once again to what was at the end of the day Chris Daines, and it will be a third place for Robert de Sunik from Team Racing Evans. He'll be very happy to be on that podium when all is said and done after what has been a very determined drive from the Dutchman. And then we look a bit further down, that's Alistair Kirk coming through. But meanwhile, the big question that you're all asking is with regards to Matt Caruana versus Callum Regarton. Well, I can tell you that as they make their way up onto the banking here, well, we have to look away from them because it will be, he's finally done it, ladies and gentlemen. He's finally brought it home, and what a race to do it. A win at Daytona for Matt Emmons from Next Gen Racing with Sam Case's UK. He finally claims a win in the GT3 AM class, and when all is said and done, it will be Matt Caruana, we believe, as he comes up through. He's held off Callum Regarton over 2 hours of racing. He takes the win in the GT3 Pro class for GTWR Roman Grosjean Academy. Callum Regarton in the end carries on through P2. He will be kicking himself for not taking the win, but he's got to also take some pride in bringing home that P2, and it will be Tom Edmonds who finishes off the podium there. And meanwhile, finishing off the podium for the GT3 AM class is Matthew Addy from Next Gen Racing with Sam Case's UK, who just in the end held off Nigel Stock when all is said and done. Well, my goodness, what a brilliant race from start to finish, up and down the field, and there's stories to tell everywhere. But I think really the story of the day for a number of viewers, you guys tuning in, you guys and girls tuning in, will be this man finally bringing home a win, and bringing home a win in this series after so many moments where he's been so close to the win and it's been denied either for an incident, not for his own fault, or partly his fault, alternatively just getting it wrong. But in the end, Matt Emmons can now say he is a race winner at Daytona in the Next Gen Racing PROTO GT3 Championship, and well, in the end, in dominant form, and a brilliant drive from him. Indeed, brilliant drives from all the field, and we have to give credit as well to the battle between Matt Caruana and Callum Regarton, where it just went to the wire. But in the end, it was a slight mistake from Callum Regarton, which saw him lose out in that final chance to go hunting after Matt Caruana. And well, in the LMP2 Pro class, it has to be said, Chris Daines, well, again, I think another perfect night at the racetrack, because he's even picked up the fastest lap. Can anybody stop the Verano Motorsport driver? That is the question as he parks up there, flashing his lights, and what a drive. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring you those race results, subject to stewards' inquiries, of course. Let's take you through them. And we can see that after 2 hours of racing at the Daytona International Speedway road course in the Apex Racing Academy lobby, it's Chris Daines who takes the overall win and the LMP2 Pro Class win in the end by 27 seconds ahead of Gaz Williams. Gaz Williams pitting in the end to go for that fastest lap, but it did not materialise the way he wanted it, but still close between the two of them, and Robert de Sunik completing the LMP2 Pro podium. The top 5 being completed by Alistair Kirk and Jamie Dorey, and it was Dan Skinner, Edward Lack, and Adam Delmont completing your LMP2 Pro classification in terms of who finished the race. Then looking to the GT3s, it's Matt Caruana who takes the GT3 Pro win, just ahead of Callum Regarton by a second, if that, and Tom Edmonds completing that podium in a brilliant recovery drive from Tom Edmonds after the incident involving himself, Callum Regarton, Matt Caruana and Antonio Giovinazzi midway through the race. But a P3 for Tom Edmonds, it is the situation whereby Altitude Esports were able to bring 2 cars home on the podium, just ahead of the fast-charging Eduardo Francochin for DRS Esport LMS1 and Jean-Louis Deschamps completing that top 5, with Carmelo Martello at P6 in the class, P14 overall, Matthew Hodges, William Fowler and Gavin Garner completing the GT3 Pros who finished. And then looking down towards the bottom end of the order, but by no means least, Matt Emmons there having it confirmed, the win in the GT3 AM class ahead of Matthew Addy and Nigel Stock. A brilliant set of racing between them. Stuart P. Taylor in the end bringing home that P22 ahead of Morten S. Usahus, then Ben Payne, Darren Doherty, Scott McLean, Jordan Pope finishing off the standings there. And it was the case that we had the retirements of Antonio Giovinazzi, Phil McDougall, Alexander Batak, Stefan Gamble Rasmussen and Maurizio Macconi. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that, it is now time for us to get ready for our post-round interviews with our selection of drivers. Do not go anywhere. We'll be back in approximately 3 to 4 minutes for those interviews. You will not want to miss them. Until then, just take it easy and get set to hear the thoughts of our drivers. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we are set for our post-round interviews with our drivers. And this week, we're focusing on our GT3 drivers in particular, particularly the GT3 and podium, because I think there's three very unique stories to tell there. But we're going to be starting off with our GT3 Pro driver of William Ford in the number 44 car. And some of you may know William Ford, of course, as the MP4 12C McLaren driver. Had a bit of an up and down race, but let's bring William Ford into the interview room and hear what he's got to say about what was a very difficult day at Daytona. So as we bring him into the interview room, William, it looked tough out there today, but you had the pace. A bit of an incident early on, however, seemed to blunt the momentum you had. How do you feel Daytona went for yourself?
I think it's pretty bittersweet because, I think I had pace to be probably top five, fight for fifth, maybe fourth. So yeah, it was a good battle with Matt, but definitely bittersweet for the incident at the beginning.
So just with regards to your approach to the race, given the pace you had in your starting position, what was the target before the incident in terms of, were you looking to have a sort of a slow start to the race, build up in the strategy, or was it more the case to find a group of drivers and try to hang in the pack? Because we saw that across the field, a lot of drivers forming into early packs.
Yeah, I knew a couple of the quick guys were going to get past, so I wasn't going to fight them. Uh, like Tom and Matt Caruana, I believe it is in the Audi. I knew those guys were going to be rapid, so if they went for a move, I was just going to let them by and try and follow them in the slipstream because it's that powerful. Um, but obviously, because of the incident, that sort of went out the window after lap three. So it was a strategy of basically how much can I recover from lap three.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of the incident in particular, so we saw in that situation, just take us from your perspective in the infield, going into turn four, you were, of course, battling with Stefan Albanese at the time, but then an LMP2 comes up your inside, and that seems to make it a three wide situation, and Albanese just goes a bit too wide.
Yeah, I saw the LMP coming through, and I was like, "Oh, there's an opening there," because Albanese had slowed down. So I went down the inside, and well, as he just lost it. Albanese just lost it. So it was one of those things. It tapped my rear and broke my rear suspension, so I had to pit basically straight away. I tried surviving. Went round another lap, but it was just so bad into left-handers, it was undrivable.
This man, that's very unfortunate. And from that point onwards, of course, with your strategy being essentially blown out the water and having to rethink the race and think about how you can get back into the fight, from that point onwards, what was the thought process in terms of, did you completely change the strategy, stick to a plan B? Just take us through what went through your mind after that.
Yeah, Plan B was sort of, well, how much can I fuel save to negate having to do this extra stop? Um, so it was quite fortunate that after I pitted for repairs, I was like, hang on, that's Matt behind me because I know we're very similar on pace. So I led him by and then just fuel saved the entire first stint, the entire hour, basically after I pitted behind him, um, to save as much fuel as I could, and it actually gained me 5 laps compared to him of fuel saving. So I was able to carry that over, and then I had a really bad second pit stop. I went in way too slow. I lost some time, so I caught him back up in the second stint, and then was right on him again. And then when he pitted, we come up side by side for the second or the last stop. Um, so it meant we were having a cracking duel the whole way through.
Oh, most definitely. And speaking of that duel, in the end, of course, what was initially a battle for P8 between yourself and Matthew Hodges turned into a three-way battle for P7 with Gavin Gardner as well. You could get alongside Hodges, but for some reason, it seems as though the McLaren just didn't quite have the edge it needed to get ahead of the Ferrari of Hodges. But against Gardner, meanwhile, it seems as though you very quickly swallowed him up by comparison.
Well, yeah, there is a reason for that because I was basically turning my McLaren into a NASCAR McLaren. Um, I was just bump drafting Matt the entire time to see how much speed we could carry together because it was something I actually practiced with him last night. So it was just coincidence that we both had incidents basically at the beginning of the race. So the whole time in the final stint, I was just pushing him along. Said because I said to him over the radio, "Let's not battle. Let's catch this guy." So to do it on the last lap or the second to last lap was a great thing to do, and it was a good achievement to do it between us.
Oh, indeed. And then, of course, at the end of the race, with Matt just being able to get past Gardner a little bit quicker than yourself, it seems as though you had to sort of give up the hunt of Hodges and focus more on keeping Gardner at bay. Was it a little bit bittersweet there? You thought, okay, P7's now out the window, but I can take P8?
Um, I knew I knew I'd be able to get P8. I thought I wasn't too bothered about the yellow Ferrari because I thought, I'm going to have Matt's slipstream. And I knew I had one chance to get Matt after the bus stop because he wasn't too strong every now and then over the bus stop. So I thought I might be able to get a slingshot down the start finish straight. But an LMP basically made that not happen.
Oh dear. With that, of course, intervening in the end, P8 today, still some solid points on the board. How do you feel your opening third of this season has been? Because at the moment, going into this round, you were placed, if I remember correctly, in what was P7. Of course, that doesn't count for the points tonight, but you've got some more points on the board, which will keep you right in the midfield of the GT3 Pro class. How do you feel on reflection the opening 4 rounds have been for you?
It's been a very mixed bag. I'd say I've had a couple of positives, even though there's been some negatives mixed in with the racing. So I really enjoyed Watkins Glen. Road Atlanta was an absolute disaster the way it ended up. And then I couldn't really race last week because I burnt my hand. So out of the 4 races, I'd say this is basically the best one I've had out of the first 4.
Well, firstly, my goodness, I'm sorry to hear about you burning your hand and as a result not being able to race last week, but we're very grateful to have you back out on the virtual tarmac with us this week, and I can appreciate where you're coming from there with regards to the mixed fortunes and really taking what you have from the opening 4 rounds and particularly this race, and now looking ahead to what is the next third of the season, so rounds 5 to 8. And speaking of which, of course, in a week's time we do move across to what is, if my memory serves me correctly, the Red Bull Ring. How are you feeling for the visit to the Austrian circuit?
I really like the European tracks that are coming up. I'd say we've finished the American leg. So I'm really looking forward to this, the Red Bull Ring and the tracks after that. Yeah, it should be enjoyable going to Europe.
Well, we look forward to seeing how you get on at the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time. But until then, thank you for joining us in the interview room, William, and well, congratulations on your result today.
Thank you very much, Paul.
All the best.
Bye.
So hearing there from William Fall, and as you were saying, very bittersweet with regards to how things played out today. And well, it could be argued that has, in a way, been the way his season has played out so far, in the fact that when he's been able to race, albeit not able to race last week due to the health situation is saying there with regards to burning his hand, it's one of those cases whereby in the opening rounds things have not gone his way, particularly as he's saying the disaster at Road Atlanta. But today it's working out, but each time it seems as though something has prevented him from, per se, getting those major points on the board. But now we've got the Tour of Continental Europe coming up, and as Foyle was saying there, circuits which he feels will be circuits that he really enjoys that seem to suit him more. Perhaps we're going to see the rise of the Crest Autosport with Apex Tracks driver and see him really start to push up the ranks there in the GT3 Pro class. But having spoken to William Fall, it's now time for us to come on to the first of our 3 GT3 AM drivers, and that is going to start off with Matthew Addy. Let's bring on into the interview room Matthew Addy very shortly and hear from his perspective what was a very determined drive to P2. So as we just get Matthew Addy into the interview room here, the NXTGEN Racing with Sam Case's UK driver. And as we bring Matthew Addy into the interview room, Matthew, a race which was all about digging deep by the looks of things and getting that best possible result and finishing the end at second on the podium. How do you feel your visit to Daytona has been?
Yeah, it's a great result, to be honest, coming from the back. So, yeah, really happy with the outcome.
Of course, coming from the back, our championship leader going into tonight. Just take us through what was your process or your thought process for going into this race, given that you'd have to effectively cut your way through the GT3 AM class to get a major result. Was there a particular strategy or approach in mind?
Bide my time, really. There's plenty of passing opportunities on the banking, and if there's any circuit to start from the back, it's probably this one for the most opportunities. So, yeah, happy it worked out that way.
Indeed, definitely worked out all the way through the race. And in terms of the wider strategy, we saw that with regards to your pit stops, a little bit out of sequence compared to some of your peers, but it seemed to work. Did you base your pit stops on sort of a window of undercutting or a window of overcut?
No, to be honest, no. I just, as soon as the tank was empty, I filled it up, and same again for the second one. To be honest, yeah, there was no strategy at all. I just went into it as normal.
I see. And then with regards to the end of that second stop, emerging for your final stint and the battle between yourself and Nigel Stock, a brilliant showdown between yourself in the Lamborghini and Stock in the Mercedes. Just take us through the dynamics of that battle, because it went on for an extended period of time and saw you at a number of instances trying to have to go around the outside of turn one, and even having the GT3 pros come up behind you and have their own battle get involved.
Yeah, it was a great battle, to be honest. I was just speaking to Nigel earlier in the race. We had a little bit of a battle, and I went past him quite easily, to be honest. I thought when I saw him the second time it was going to be easier, but I don't know how he got so much speed. It was really difficult to overtake him. I think the only advantage I had was probably turn one, and that was only because he was braking a little bit earlier. But everywhere else we were pretty much equal. It was a real good battle.
Oh, indeed. And we saw you try to make the attempt around the outside into turn one the first time. It didn't quite work out. You just couldn't quite get the front end turned through the corner. But the second time you made it work. But we saw Nigel stop back out on the brakes quite heavily early on. Did you feel as though you started to have the measure of him as we went deeper and deeper and closer to the checkered flag?
We've had quite a few battles in the past, to be honest, and there's a lot of respect there. So yeah, I'm glad he did back out, but it would have been equal if he had a run on me. I would have backed out earlier. So yeah, it was pretty good.
Well, it's fantastic racing, and we're very grateful to have seen the respect and the fair racecraft between the pair of you. And of course, with that second place today, it means that going into the second third of the season, so rounds 5 through to 8, and when we start our tour of continental Europe, you'll be well placed to be right up there at the top of the GT3 AM class. On reflection, how do you feel your opening third of this season has gone to the opening 4 rounds?
Pretty good. I didn't have a great one first round, which is probably going to be my drop score, to be honest. But I'm aiming for consistency this year, which is what seems to be coming. Next track, Red Bull Ring. Really looking forward to that. I love the track. So see how we go, really.
Oh, indeed. And well, the Red Bull Ring, can you give us any indication of what your expectations are there? Because we know, of course, you're pushing for those big results.
P1, you got to be P1, haven't you? Really? So
Oh, very true. Well, we look forward to seeing how you get on in Austria in 2 weeks' time. But until then, thank you for joining us in the interview room as always. And well, congratulations on what was a brilliant drive to second place at Daytona.
brilliant. Thanks a lot, Paul.
All the best.
Cheers.
So hearing there from Matthew Addy, very happy with his performance. And there's that interesting contrast there, which you find with Matthew Addy with regards to on the pit stops, there was no strategy other than drive until the fuel tank is empty, then pit, get the fuel in the car and go again. Whereas in terms of cutting through the order, having that pace and also finding those right times to come through. But I do like the respect shown between Matthew Addy and Nigel Stock out on circuit, and that's reflected in Matthew's interview there with respect to the racecraft between the two of them and the fact that when Matthew came past Nigel Stock the first time, back when they were running in the earlier stints, and he made quite a short piece of work of Nigel Stock at that time, the fact that when Stock then became very assertive and defensive in that second battle, in the final stint, it was the case he didn't just assume he was going to pass him easy, but he had to work for it, and Addy in the end braved it around the outside. And I must agree, in terms of looking back through the results, the reason why Matthew Addy is was our championship leader going into this round is because he has been Mr. Consistent in the GT3 AM class, and well, that second place is definitely going to keep him right up at the top end of the GT3 AM table going to the Red Bull Ring. But now we must come on to our third driver for interview, and that is, of course, Nigel Stock, our third place man from today. And as we do bring Nigel Stock into the interview room, let's hear his thoughts on what is growing form. As just give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, we'll bring Nigel Stock on in. And as he comes into the interview room now, Nigel, a fantastic performance tonight to back up what was a win in the sprint at Mosport a week ago. How do you feel about your third place at Daytona today?
It was good. Hopefully you can hear me, because I've had problems with interviews lately, so...
That's no problem. You are coming through. We can make you out very nicely.
Oh, good. Oh, good then. Yeah, it was good. It was good to get finally get a second win, because obviously the last one I won was season 1, so it was nice to finally get another win, and had a good battle there towards the end. Sadly couldn't get the second, but at least I got a good finish and some good points.
Oh, most definitely. And just on that, earlier in the race, we saw not as much pace from yourself until the sort of final 2 stints, particularly the last stint. You seem to come alive with pace. Was that sort of part of your strategy, that have a slow start to the race but build the pace as the time goes on? What was the strategy to your race at Daytona?
Well, it was a bit of that, and it was a bit of trying to just sort of sit behind and get a bit, save a bit of fuel, really, and just sort of let the race sort of come to me, really, and see where we were towards the end, and then, well, yeah, it's basically that, really.
Oh, indeed. And then coming on to that final stint and that superb battle between yourself and Matthew Addy. For a long time, you held on to second place, but you started to find more and more inventive ways of trying to go around the outside of you into turn one. Just take us through that battle from your perspective.
Yeah, it was good. It was. I knew that he when he pitted, he changed tires like on the second one. I changed them on the first stop, so I always thought that maybe his tires might sort of come alive towards, and sort of mine might go off towards the end. But I was just sort of, and then I was sort of thinking towards the end maybe I could get him with like sort of slipstreaming across the line, sort of like with the penultimate lap I did. But then I saw there was back markers and he had a slipstream, so I knew that idea was gone then. So but it was still good fun.
Oh, most definitely. We loved it on the broadcast, seeing you two battle side by side for a good number of laps. And I do have to ask, now that we've completed the first 4 rounds, we've completed the first stage of this series, we've got a week's break ahead. How do you feel the opening 4 rounds have been for you?
A bit up and down. I sort of would be good to try and have two races where I get good points, where like one race I do pretty well and then the next race doesn't go so well. A bit like last week, I won the race in the first race, and then the second race I crashed out with like 2 laps to go and then didn't get any points. So that's sort of the way my season's been going at the moment. But hopefully we can try and be a bit more consistent and try and maybe get into the top 3 or something in the championship later on, and hopefully maybe get 1 or 2 more wins.
Well, indeed. Well, we look forward to seeing whether you're able to achieve that. I'm sure you've got the pace and the determination to do so. And speaking of upcoming races then, how are you feeling for the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time?
It's a good track. It's probably one of my favourites, and I enjoy like racing there. I enjoy watching like I enjoy watching MotoGP and that on there, and F1 and all that. I think it's a really good track, so hopefully we can get some good points.
Well, fingers crossed for you. But until then, congratulations on your 3rd place day, a well-deserved result, and we appreciate you joining us in the interview room. Thank you for your time, Nigel, and we wish you all the best in advance of the race in 2 weeks' time.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me in the interview.
That's no problem at all. You have a lovely evening.
And you. Bye.
So hearing there from Nigel Stock, and very happy with Harry's performance tonight, when you can hear that in his voice, although a little bit, I think, not disheartened, but a little bit perhaps wishing he could have been able to hold on to 2nd place when all was said and done. But at the same time, I think he'll take that as a building block, especially with the win at Mosport last week. But I think the thing that Stock needs to work on, he even mentioned it himself, is that consistency of results. So at Mosport, he had the win in what was the first race, but then that retirement with 2 laps to go in the second race, which cost him very dearly. But I think if he's able to start putting together that consistent form, to find that consistency that Matthew Addy has and deliver it with that increase in pace, I think Nigel Stock right now could be a bit of a sleeping contender for the GT3 AM Championship. I mean, going into tonight's round, he was P6 on 84 points, only 16 off of Matthew Addy, our championship leader. That gap will open up a little bit to Addy because of the fact he finished behind Addy, but there's no doubt about it. Nigel Stock is looking more and more dangerous, and I mean in a positive way, not in a dangerous way out in the circuit, but he's looking dangerous to the aspirations of our top 3 in the championship, i.e. Matthew Addy, Ben Payne and Matt Emmons, and I think that Mercedes is in very capable hands. But now we must come on to our final interview for the day, and that is our winner in the GT3 AM class, Matt Emmons here. Let's bring him in to the interview room here, and it is the case. Let's hear from the driver who, well, he's finally been able to put to bed the question, can he pick up a win in the Audi ARA? Let's hear from the man himself. So as we do try and bring him into the interview room. Well, as we bring Matt into the interview room, Matt, it took 4 rounds, but in the end you finally put to bed the question of whether you can pick up the win in the Audi R8. How does it feel to have taken the win at Daytona?
To be honest, very, very tiring. I don't think I'd ever say the words on a sim rig, but I'm absolutely knackered.
Oh, indeed. Well, going into this night, I remember you saying in the pre-race discussion about the fact you weren't feeling 100%, plus also a broken finger as well, which doesn't help. Was that on your mind all the way through the race, or was it a case that you're running on adrenaline for a whole 2 hours?
I'll be honest, after about 10, 15 minutes, I completely forgot. I kind of got used to not using it to paddle shift, and then after, I think it was about 5 laps to go, I started realizing, oh, I'm actually using it and it's not hurting. But no, I just knew what I needed to do, which was put my head down, not make any silly mistakes, just be consistent and try and open up a big enough gap where if something does go wrong, I've got that fallback, so to speak.
Oh, most definitely. And looking more to your wider race now, obviously at the start of this race, in terms of your starting position in the midfield of the GT3 AM class, what was your strategy as a whole, given the fact that you thought you had a lot of pace going into this one? Was it to try and cut through the pack as quickly as possible, try and get in a pack of drivers and do some fuel saving? Just what was the game plan?
Game plan was not to make any mistakes, and just wait, be patient. Don't be the silly person I've been for the past 3 rounds, which was just sit, wait. And I knew if I got clean air, which I eventually did, I'd have the pace to be able to pull away. I mean, I've done a lot of practice at Daytona, so especially in the GT3 cars. I just knew if I got a chance, I'd have to put my foot down and not throw caution to the wind, but definitely push a bit harder than I was a bit more comfortable with, and just trusting myself in the pace that I've found in the Audi. And yeah, just it worked, I must admit. I didn't expect to have such a gap on Morton when I came out the pits and the rest of the AMs. But at that point, it was just consistency, knew what lap times I needed to do, keep my head down and not look at anything, just concentrate on the road ahead of me.
Oh, indeed. And speaking about that first round of pit stops, of course, when you went into the pits, or yourself and Morton went into the pits on different laps, the gap was 2.5 seconds with Morton ahead, Morten Oosterhuis for those watching. And then when you came out the pits, of course, you were ahead by about the region of 2 seconds. We know that the delta in the pit stop from looking back was 4.5 seconds. Just with that in mind, of course, when you jumped into the lead, was it then a case that you were just putting in qualifying lap after qualifying lap with that clear in front as if you were sort of focused on that? Or was it sort of a bit of a reality check to say, you know, I'm leading this race. We've still got the best part of an hour or so to go, but I'm leading now?
The first, well, when I came out the pits and I noticed Morton hadn't pitted, it was qualifying laps. I thought, I've got 2 or 3 laps. I've got clean air. I've got no one around me, no one to lap me. I've got to put my foot down and push now. And I think when I came out the pit, and Morton came out the pits, I think it was about 4 second gap I had. And then at that point, it was right. Let's dial it back a bit. Let's not, because you're going to make a silly mistake if you carry on. Dial it back. Just do the lap times you can do. Just be consistent and don't make a silly mistake. And it seemed to work.
Most definitely, and that translated well as the race went deeper towards its conclusion. And I do have to ask, of course, we don't like to celebrate when drivers put it in the wall or get it wrong, but when we saw that Morten Oosterhuis had made that mistake at the bus stop chicane and hit the tyre wall, was there sort of a sigh of relief on your end, thinking that gap now is going to be huge to whoever takes over P2, or was it not even in your mind about that?
To be honest, I didn't know that Morton had hit the wall. I'd just put my head down that much. I think every 5 or 6 laps, I was looking to see if I could see an arm on the time delta to see what the gap would be. And I presumed that he'd just been overtaken by lap cars. I didn't think anything had happened to him.
Indeed, unfortunately, he did make a mistake at the bus stop chicane, which cost him a number of places in the end. And Morton did end up finishing down in what was P5 in class. But focusing on yourself in terms of, now that we've finished the first third of this season and you've ended it on a high with a win, just reflecting on the opening 4 races, you were saying earlier about putting those mistakes to bed. How do you feel the opening 4 races have been in terms of your championship campaign?
To be honest, before tonight, when I was looking back at the points table and thinking I was third, it was a bit of a shock because I've not had the best first third of the season. I've had the silly mistakes. I've had some incidents not go my way, stuff like that. Excuse me. I just wanted to end it on a high and then think, right, I've now got 2 weeks till Red Bull Ring. So let's get some practice in for that, and then go from there and see where I can take this championship.
Oh, indeed. And speaking about the Red Bull Ring, of course, in 2 weeks' time, how are you feeling for the Austrian circuit?
I'm definitely going to need to get some practice in. That's honesty. It's never been my favourite track. I've always struggled a bit for pace because it's such a mixed match of a track where you've got the fast corners, the really slow corners, and you really need to get good traction out of them. Yeah, it's something I'm definitely going to have to knuckle down and get some practice in and try and push towards hopefully doing better than what I did last season where I finished third.
Oh, indeed. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you take to the Austrian circuit in 2 weeks' time. But until then, congratulations on sealing the win at Daytona, Matt. Thank you for joining us in the interview room, and we look forward to seeing you back out on circuit in the near future.
Thank you very much, Paul. I just hope you cut the donuts after the race that I've always wanted to do there.
We may not have caught those on the camera.
Oh, it's fine. No, I've always said if I ever won at Daytona and at one of these races, I'd do donuts around the Daytona grass, but yeah, it's all right.
Apologies, but
it's all right. Oh,
with that, you have a lovely evening.
And you, Paul.
So hearing there from Matt Emmons, and I do apologise, ladies and gentlemen, for not catching his donuts on camera. That's a mistake on my part, but still, you can hear there the tiredness of Matt Emmons' voice, the fact that I think he's expended all the energy he had available over the course of the race today. But to be fair, I think he's put to bed what would be that question that was on his mind going into this round, whether he could pick up that win in the end and get that Audi to calm down. And it's all those little mistakes, and of course, when you're in that situation, when you know you've got pace to be in the top three, if not leading the class, and we've seen that from Emmons since day one at Watkins Glen, he's now finally made that statement. And well, going into tonight, it was the case. It was only P3 at 4 points off of Matthew Addy, the championship leader. If my calculations are correct, he will be joint leading the class with Matthew Addy, if not only a point or two ahead going into round 5. And we are hearing that there are some mistakes with the results tables, and we've had that from 6000 Kashmir fan in the YouTube chat. And well, that's absolutely fine. We'll get those rectified for round number 5. Apologies for those. But it is the case that Emmons right now, if he can ride this momentum, it could be the case that we have got a huge championship battle on our hands between the two teammates of Matthew Addy and Matt Emmons. But let's not count out the Hilliard Esports drivers of Alexander Batak, Stefan Gamborg, Rasmussen and Morten Oosthus, who today, Hilliard Esports just had a disaster of a day, but they will come back strong. We know their potential, and they are major contenders as well. And also, Nigel Stock, as we said earlier, a driver who is waiting in the shadows to pounce, and I think his time is coming to take at least a couple more wins before the season is over. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our interviews. And, well, that concludes the show for today. Thank you very much for watching. And if you do want to know more about the Next Gen Racing community, why not check us out, our official website. That is nextgenracing.co.uk. Alternatively, if you are so Facebook inclined, you can take a look at our Facebook group. That's facebook.com/groups/Next Gen Racing. Also, a huge thank you to our partners, without whom we'd not be able to run this lobby. And of course, that is our title sponsor for Lobby 1. That's Apex Racing Academy. Their website, apexracingac.com. Go there today to take your iRacing experience and your capabilities to the next level. Whether it's half a tenth or a whole second, they'll be on hand to provide you with the best possible guidance in the iRacing sim world. But now we must look ahead to what is the season break. We have a week off, so we will not be racing next week. We'll be back for round number 5 and kicking off the series tour of continental Europe with a visit to Spielberg, or the Red Bull Ring in Austria in short. That'll be Wednesday the 11th of May 2022. If you're missing your racing fix until then, remember we will be bringing you round 4 at Daytona for what is Lobby 2, or the IMB Raceware Lobby, this Friday. So that will be on Friday the 29th of April 2022, and we look forward to seeing you there. But otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, and until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, from both myself as your commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, and all of us at Next Gen, remember to stay on track. Good night.